On October 7th, the Islamist terror militia Hamas attacked Israel. More than 1,000 people were cruelly murdered, many of them women and children. The ongoing consequences include an armed conflict in the Middle East and a dramatic wave of anti-Semitic crime in Western countries. How can Israel and its partners overcome this crisis together? How can the humanitarian challenges in the affected areas be addressed? What measures can politicians in Germany and Europe take to counter the rise in antisemitism? Please join me in welcoming your moderators for tonight, Welt Chief Anchor Tatiana Ohm and the Jerusalem Post Deputy CEO Mayan Hoffman.
Hello, welcome to Joint Perspectives, a German-Israeli summit. We're so happy to have you here. On October 7th, Israel experienced the unimaginable. Thousands of Hamas terrorists infiltrated our country, murdering 1,200 people and kidnapping 253 more, mostly civilians. Around 100 hostages are still in the grips of Hamas.
In times of darkness and despair, coming together, joining forces, exchanging views and experiences just seems like the right thing to do. That's why we are here today. And Mayan and I, we feel very privileged to guide you through today's agenda, which you've seen it is fully packed. So with no further ado, let's start.
I'd like to introduce the editor-in-chief of Welt, Jennifer Wilson, and the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, Svika Klein.
Hello, a very warm welcome to all of you. We are very happy to have you here. A very warm welcome and hello to the ministers, Gideon Saar, Marco Buschmann. Welcome, Your Excellencies. Welcome to the members of Parliament. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, everybody. I must confess, we never before organized a conference in such a short time. I think it was the end of November when I first spoke with dear Avi Meyer about the possibility to do so. We strongly felt that we had to do what is possible to organize as quickly as possible a conference. And we were able to do this thanks to a lot of helping hands. We were able to do this by joining forces with Jerusalem Post, and I'm very thankful for our colleagues, our friends, our partners like Svika and Mayan that we are here today now. I must say, seeing all of you here, so many of you, is also kind of an emotional moment. So I just decided that I will skip the words I had written down to say now about how and why and when, because I also believe that there was kind of a lack of humans being human in the past few months outside of Israel. So I guess I will try to be exactly that, human in this moment, and just speak directly from my heart. The 7th of October, I think we can only try to imagine what that meant for a lot of you here in the room, for a lot of people in Israel, but also for us here in Germany. It changed a lot. There is a before and the after the 7th of October. I, as a journalist, will always defend impartiality. We should not have a side, never. But it is no secret that this company, that we at Axel Springer and at Die Welt committed ourselves to support the right of existence of Israel. This is a promise our founder made, and we stick to it. If this is a side, looking back at German history, it is the side of humanity. As it's the side of humanity to condemn a terror attack, before talking about political questions. And to name a terror attack, before saying the slightest little tiny but. It is beyond understanding that we can't agree on that anymore in a lot of places in this world. This is one of the reasons why we felt so strongly we had to organize this. And let me even commit the second worst sin as a journalist and be personal for a second. Only 2 days after the terror attacks, it was the funeral of one of my best friends. She was the most loveliest person, and she taught me a lot, perhaps the most important lessons in life. Eva was 97 years old when she died in September. She was 17 when she arrived in Auschwitz. I owe her to not be silent. I owe her to say things loudly when they happen. We all owe her and the other survivors and every human being, and we owe it to ourselves to not just let things happen. I know these probably seems a little bit simple words, maybe even naive, but sometimes it's the little things. And also, this is the message of a person who has seen it all. So, to close, I'm really looking forward to the next couple of hours, and I would want to invite you to be bold, to debate controversially, to fight with words, but never forget, not now and not in any other moment, to be human, to be a mensch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Jennifer said she would just throw her notes away. Maybe I should do the same thing, because you can't top that. But I'll try anyways. First of all, thank you for being here with us. When my wife, Avital, was a child, her grandmother took her aside, a Holocaust survivor. Her name was Bella. She was in Auschwitz. And she told her, one day, you're going to have to run away from the Nazis. Now, she grew up in Israel, an Israeli Sabra, tough Israeli Sabra. And her grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor, said, one day you're going to have to run away. And it kind of became like a joke in our family that, black Holocaust humor, Jews are allowed to laugh about the Holocaust, nobody else is. But on October 7th, suddenly, it kind of became real. When did ever an Israeli, parent, think that their children will have to be hiding in a closet, under a table? The stories of heroes, young heroes, older heroes, things that we never ever, when we say never again, right? We were like, never again. But it happened again in a very different way. But it is something that we didn't expect in our wildest dreams that anything like this would happen. And never as a nation did we think that we would have to deal with this type of thing. To think the fact that your children will be kidnapped, taken from your homes, torn apart from their families, killed brutally, taken hostage. That's exactly what happened on October 7th. But also, never did I think that I would be standing here in the capital of Germany. And when we say never again, we're talking about the Holocaust. But we're actually here in unity, fighting against a very important cause, or as journalists, trying to tell this story the way we think is correct. And, the Holocaust actually was born here in Germany, ended just 79 years ago, 6 million Jews who were killed. But standing here in Berlin with our best ally in Europe and possibly the world is something that is not a given. We can't just be like, oh yeah, the German foreign minister comes to Israel every other week. No, that's a big deal. And the support that we received is amazing. And the work on this conference with Welt, with Jennifer and her amazing staff, is something that we never experienced. You definitely never experienced organizing a conference with Israelis, but that is definitely something that you will remember. But also, we have to remember, and we have the mother of Romi, a hostage, who is here and will speak. The youngest hostage was 9 months old, Kfir Bibas, the redhead, the most famous baby maybe in the world now. And we keep on praying every day for his return. And I wanted to thank Welt. I was in your office yesterday and seeing the covers that you created in the newspaper since October 7th. And it's just overwhelming because I would never have expected, even though I know of our relationship that is good between the countries, I would never expect day after day that type of a coverage. And I think it's a privilege to do that with you. We at the Jerusalem Post have been working night and day since October 7th. That Saturday morning, I myself keep Shabbat. I don't usually work on Shabbat. My wife said, I think you have to turn on your phone. And we haven't stopped working since then. Trying to tell the story, trying to bring life to the dead and the hostages. We were established 91 years ago as the Palestine Post, surprisingly. Our newspaper included coverage of the Holocaust, but also assisted in the establishment of the Jewish state, the only Jewish state in the world. So I would like to end with a quote from Isaiah 36, Uvduyei Hashem yeshuvun uva Tzion berina, and God's ransom shall return and come with the shouting to Zion, crowned with joy everlasting. At this moment, please rise for a minute of silence for those who were murdered on October 7th and all those who were killed in Gaza in the past 4 months. Thank you very much. Please be seated. And thank you, Jennifer.
A bit different to the beginning of other wars after 7th of October, the German government did not hesitate for a split second to make its support for Israel very, very clear to the whole world. And as Vika just said, the foreign minister is every other week by now in Israel. She is just right now at this very moment in Israel. Another member of Scholz's cabinet, we are very happy and lucky, agreed to join us here. And he himself experienced only a couple of weeks ago, while he was trying to give a lecture at a university in Warsaw, the hatred of the pro-Palestinian protest right there. He was trying to interact, but didn't succeed. Here, we are happy to have him. We are happy to listen to him. And it is his job to fight antisemitism and to somehow lay the legal grounds, but I'm very sure that it is much more than just a job for him. Dr. Marco Buschmann, the German Federal Minister of Justice, the floor is yours.
Mrs. Wilton, Mr. Klein, dear Minister Saar, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for inviting me here this evening and for allowing me to say a few words. I wish I could say that I'm happy to be here, but that would only be half true. Of course, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to many distinguished and interesting people. Some of you I would be so bold as to call my friends. So I'm very happy to be here, but I'm not happy about the reason for being here today. None of us here. In one of his diaries, the writer Imre Kertész asks, "Why do people hate the Jews even more since Auschwitz?" He then answers the question himself, because of Auschwitz. It seems to me that the same perverse logic cited by Kertész is being applied to the 7th of October and its repercussions. On that day, Jews were so clearly and indisputably the victims of antisemitism, simply cannot forgive them, and anti-Semites cannot forgive them. And the fact that Israel is now in a position to strike back is intolerable to all Jew haters and makes them feel all the more entitled to give free rein to their hatred. This is something that Jews are confronted with on a daily basis, including here in Germany. Threats against Jews are especially prevalent in universities. On a regular basis, anti-Semites gather in sufficient numbers to disrupt events so severely that they have to be called off. This is bad enough, but it does not stop there. Just a week ago, a student at Berlin's Freie Universität, Rav Shapira, was assaulted by another student in the heart of Berlin. Shapira had to be taken to hospital for surgery. He had been protesting against pro-Palestine demonstrations at his university in the wake of the 7th of October attacks. All he did was denounce the trivialization of terrorism and draw attention to the plight of Israel abused by Hamas. Shapira is a Jew. It is not my place to second-guess the investigations, but it seems highly likely that this was yet another of the anti-Semitic crimes that are become so common in Germany. In all of last year, the Federal Criminal Police Office recorded no less than 2,300 such crimes. 2,300 such crimes. But since the terrorist attack by Hamas on the 7th of October, there have been almost as many again. These are harrowing figures, and their implications are just as concerning. A majority of Jews in Germany do not feel safe in public. Politicians and investigation authorities must act. And they are doing just that, for example, by applying the full force of criminal law. The raids late last year against Hamas members in Berlin and Rotterdam, the ban of the activities of Hamas, and the dissolution of the Samidun network, they all send a clear message. Those who plan or commit acts of violence against Jews in this country will face charges. Those who disseminate propaganda for unconstitutional and terrorist organizations, who displays the symbols of unconstitutional or terrorist organizations, who burn the Israeli flag, who support foreign terrorist networks or condone criminal acts, are engaging in criminal behavior themselves and will be prosecuted accordingly. And if the perpetrators are not German citizens, in addition to criminal prosecution, we must also take a close look at their resident status. In some cases, of course, this will mean expulsion. There is a clear public interest in expelling those who incite hatred against Jews from this country. The last thing we want for anti-Semites to become German citizens. On this point, may I draw your attention to the debate on German citizenship law. Many disreputable voices, but sadly also some reputable ones, have repeatedly lamented what they see as a devaluation of citizenship in Germany. Nothing could be further from the truth. The process may in certain cases be faster than before, but the criteria have become more stringent. One example is the requirement for applicants to be able to support themselves financially. Another is stricter rules to prevent the naturalizations of anti-Semites. In future, naturalization authorities are to investigate whether even minor offenses such as verbal abuse were prompted by anti-Semitic motives. If an applicant is listed in the Federal Central Criminal Register, naturalization authorities are required to contact the competent public prosecution office. And if a judge finds that an act was driven by anti-Semitic sentiment, the perpetrator will be barred from acquiring German citizenship. Anti-Semites are not welcome in Germany and will certainly not be given a German passport. But anti-Semitism is of course not limited to the streets. It is just prevalent online. Here too, our authorities are taking decisive action. Since the 7th of October, the Federal Criminal Police Office has issued 273 removal orders against online channels or content and sent an additional 2,977 deletion requests to service providers, and most of them are complied with it. The federal government has prohibited dissemination of the Hamas slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine must be free." The ban also applies to the internet. This means, for instance, that the sale of T-shirts displaying the slogan is an offense. Germany cannot enforce the ban alone. Under the Digital Services Act, responsibility for the major online platforms lies with the EU. I therefore contacted the relevant commissioner, Thierry Breton, and asked him to carefully monitor online marketplaces such as Amazon and Alibaba for products bearing the slogan. Operators are required to take steps to prevent dissemination of unlawful content. I have every confidence that the Commission will keep a close eye on the situation and take appropriate action where necessary. It is not acceptable for T-shirts challenging Israel's existence to be freely available to order online. The government and administration are committed to fighting anti-Semitism with all available means. But they cannot win this struggle alone. They need the support of our schools, our universities, our associations and youth centers, and also our media. As a politician, it is not appropriate for me to judge the work of the media, and that is not my intent, but I do have one request: that Hamas not be confused with a news agency, and that the outrageous term hostage exchange not be applied to a conflict between a state governed by the rule of law on the one hand and the terrorist mob on the other. Equally important in the fight against anti-Semitism are the citizens of this country. That is why I was so pleased to see hundreds of thousands of demonstrators who took to the streets in protest against the enemies of our Constitution. This was an important show of commitment to our constitutional values. The participants marched for democracy, for human dignity, for fundamental rights, and for the rule of law. But I cannot help thinking that I would have liked to see these same people take to the streets in the wake of the 7th of October. Because anti-Semites are also enemies of the Constitution, as Josef Schuster once again emphasized in this ceremonial address at the New Year's reception at my ministry a couple of weeks ago, and he's right to do so. The writer Saul Bellow wrote that there is no accuracy in suppression. If you hold down one thing, you hold down the adjoining. And so, to those who tolerate antisemitism because they believe it does not affect them, we must make clear, yes, anti-Semites hate Jews, but in doing so, they hate people. In fact, they hate humanity itself, because those who oppress a particular group of people will quite happily do the same to another. Hamas is a prime example. It does not just hate and murder Jews, but also homosexuals, women, dissenters. It is plain to see how much value Hamas places on the lives of its own people, none at all. Otherwise, the Israeli hostages will still being held would have been released. Hamas would have stopped its bombardments of Israel, which incidentally merit greater media coverage than they receive, and it would not misuse hospitals and schools as protective shields. To celebrate this murderous organization, or even to portray it as a kind of liberation movement, as seems to be almost fashionable in certain circles, is outrageous, apparent, and stupid. It is to plant the seed of hate, a seed which sadly flourishes all too often. In this conflict, we stand by Israel's side. That is where Germany belongs. We do so because of our historical responsibility. That's true. But we do so because of the liberal democratic ideals we share with Israel. Freedom and the rule of law, an independent judiciary and free elections, protection of the individual, a diverse press, of which the Jerusalem Post is a notable element. Israel is fighting for its existence, and it is doing so with full regard for the law. This is the view of the International Court of Justice. Otherwise, it would have ordered an end to the fighting. Many innocent people are dying in this war. Every one of these deaths is lamentable, whether in Israel or Gaza. But the responsibility for these casualties lies squarely with Hamas. To those who say that we must look at both sides of the conflict, I reply, that is precisely what we do. On the one side, we see a murderous terrorist organization, and on the other, innocent victims, Israeli and Palestinian. On the one side, we see a fanatical Islamist regime, and on the other, a liberal democracy. On the one side, we see veiled anti-Semitic hate, and on the other, Jews in fear of their lives, including here in Germany. So we know exactly where we stand. We stand with the victims, with liberal democracy, with Jews. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel because we know who started the terror of the 7th of October. We stand with Israel because we know that every nation in the world would expect its government to eliminate the threat of suffering such terror again. And we stand with Israel because we are convinced that our friends in Israel know that even a legitimate war must come to an end one day. Am Israel Chai.
Minister Buschmann, thank you so much for your words. I'll just take a moment. So, I bet I'm not the only one wondering, after having listened to a German federal minister, what might be the thoughts, the ideas of an Israeli minister at this time? What might an Israeli minister think about the support of the German government, about the right now very much debated two-state solution again, but also, of course, what might be his ideas how to free the hostages? We're very happy to welcome here today amongst us Gideon Saar, the chairman of the new Home Party, minister and member of the Security Cabinet. Minister, the stage is yours.
I want to thank Minister Bushman that had to left and State Minister Lindner, both for your friendship and for your moral stand. I want to thank our hosts from Die Welt and the Jerusalem Post, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. In the history of the Zionist movement, some believed that the solution of the Jewish problem through the establishment of a Jewish state would end the historical phenomenon of antisemitism. But long ago, we understood that this terrible hatred and persecution of Jews persists and thrives. It is probably here to stay. Yet, even the realists among us did not anticipate its resurgence again to such an extent. In universities, intellectual circles, online and on the streets, speaking Hebrew, wearing a kippah or Magen David are grounds for attack today in Europe, the United States, Canada, and further. In recent months, we have witnessed a strangling surge of hundreds of percent in anti-Semitic incidents in the most advanced countries in the world. Against this backdrop, this conference is especially important, and I want to congratulate the organizer, Die Welt and Jerusalem Post, for this crucial initiative, and all of you, the participants. It's hard to believe, but the eruption of this wave of new anti-Semitism came precisely after the heinous massacre on October 7th. An onslaught of mass murder, rape, beheading of victims, burning babies and children in ovens and homes. While kibbutzim were still under invasion of Hamas terrorists on a rampage of murder and rape, there was already a wave of anti-Semitism sweeping the web and the world. It's important to recognize the ideological sources of this murderous madness. According to Hamas, killing Jews is a religious command. This, by the way, is genocide. According to Hamas charter, Jews are responsible for every negative historical event in their eyes, including those in which they themselves was the victims. Among these events, it is all open in the Hamas charter, by the way. The French Revolution, the Communist Revolution, World Wars I and II, the establishment of the United Nations, aimed at world domination, and the founding of the UN. The Palestinian Authority is a major center of institutionalized anti-Semitism, which also thrives in its educational system. And its leader, Mahmoud Abbas, has time and again voiced classic anti-Semitic expressions. Like in last August, when he claimed at a conference in Ramallah that Hitler did not annihilate the Jews because of their religion, but because of their role in usury and banking. Today, it is abundantly clear that the new anti-Semitism is against the state of the Jewish people. Classical anti-Semitism delegitimized and dehumanized Jews. The new antisemitism does the very same thing to their state. The calling card of today's antisemitism is the delegitimization of Israel and the denial of its right to self-defense. So here stands Israel, the most attacked country in the world, now besieged from 6 different fronts in the focus of modern blood label, aimed at trying its hands in an attempt to defend itself against the multi-front jihadist onslaught. The attack against Israel is militarily, ideological, political, and legal combined. This is an excellent opportunity to express our appreciation to Germany for its decision to stand by Israel in the outrageous process unfolding in the ICJ. Also deserving of appreciation are the steps taken by the German Minister of Justice and the German Minister of Interior to ban Hamas activity in Germany and publicly express support for it. The war that opened against Israel on October 7 is actually a war opened against the Jewish people, and its collateral consequences, an extreme rise in antisemitism worldwide. Today, Jews almost everywhere in the world feel it. There is a rise of hundreds of percent in anti-Semitic incidents worldwide, and Jewish communities feel insecure. I want to emphasize here what is ostensibly known, but in fact largely ignored. Israel's unilateral complete withdrawal from Gaza Strip in 2005. This withdrawal included the evacuation of our military forces from the Strip, all our communities, and even the evacuation of cemeteries and graves. All of this did not prevent Gaza from becoming a base of murderous aggression against Israel, a terror state shooting indiscriminately at Israel towns, villages, and citizens. As described in Hamas doctrine, non-Islamic sovereignty is forbidden on any part of Israel. So there is no difference in their eyes between the settlements evacuated by Israel in 2005 and the communities that was attacked, burned, and brutalized, killed their residents on October 7, 2023. This requires realistic assessment of the situation. International support for Israel's action in Gaza is still vital and necessary. We need it actually now more than we need it in October 7. Israel must remove the threat, and the threat will only be removed with the destruction of Hamas' military and governmental capabilities in Gaza. This is, of course, vital also in efforts to achieve stability in the region. We are aware that many of our friends worldwide still believe and support in what is called the two-state solution. I want to warn that in the current situation, there is a great danger, almost certainty, that a Palestinian state will be a Hamas state that will destabilize the region and continue alongside with its extreme Islamist partners efforts to achieve their goal, which is the destruction of Israel. But I want to say specifically to all those who still support the two-state solution, the most dangerous thing is unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. This is not about establishing a Palestinian state within the context, within the framework of resolving the historical conflict with Israel. This conflict will be solved only by direct negotiations between the parties. Rather, it's a process where Palestinians won't have to pay the necessary price of compromise, but will continue the conflict with Israel from an improved position of a state which inherently undermines Israel's ability to defend itself. Without them relinquishing any of their extreme demands, the return of so-called refugees and Palestine from the river to the sea. Such a move will perpetuate the conflict instead of resolving it. Therefore, I urge our friends, don't. Last thing, but more importantly, earlier this week in Rafah, our security forces rescued 2 of our citizens, the hostages Fernando Simon Marmon, 60 years old, and Luis Har, 70 years old, who were held for over than 4 months in brutal captivity. The abduction of civilians from their homes, from their beds, their mistreatment and denial of basic human rights is a phenomenon that the entire Western world should condemn, must condemn, and fight against. Any failure to have utter moral clarity here is unacceptable. Otherwise, it will become a pledge, and no one will be safe in their homes, not in Israel, not in Europe, not elsewhere. I call on every leader, on every freedom-loving nation and person, exert all political pressure to help release our 134 hostages who are still held in Gaza in an inhumane manner. And I see here one of the mothers of the hostages, Meirav Leshem Gonen, that her daughter is still in captivity in Gaza Strip right now. Again, thank you, the organizer, for this important conference, and I wish success to all the panels and the discussions in this conference. Thank you.
I would now like to introduce Tobias Lindner, Minister of State at the Federal Foreign Office. He will discuss Germany's responsibility in the aftermath of the Hamas massacre and in light of the Holocaust. He will discuss the prospects of a two-state solution and the actions being taken by the IDF in Gaza. The minister will be interviewed by Daniel Dylan Burmer, Senior Editor of Welt, and Svika Klein, Editor-in-Chief of the Jerusalem Post.
Yes, thank you, Tobias Lindner, for being with us, and thanks for all of you for being here tonight. Mr. Lindner, just taking the cue of what we just heard, that reminded me of the last time I met you, and that was actually in the middle of the Persian Gulf, at the Manama Dialogue Conference in the Kingdom of Bahrain. And there you held a rather remarkable speech, trying to explain to the Arab dignitaries in the hall how the Holocaust, how this history shaped Germany's view of the Middle East conflict. And I wonder, from your experience dealing with your counterparts in the Middle East, do you have the feeling that this particular view of Germany is being understood? Does it make your role more credible, or does it cause problems?
So, thank you very much, and good evening. Thanks for having me. And you touched on the right point, this Staatsräson thing. And many Germans even do not know what does it mean, or it's debated what are the implications. To be blunt, it makes things more complicated. We are always accused of doing the wrong thing, not standing firmly enough on Israel's side, at the same time being accused of being blind-eyed when it comes to the suffering of the Palestinians, of the civil population, especially in Gaza. But I listened very, very carefully to the opening remarks. And Jennifer Wilton said there are many buts in the debates, and I cannot agree more. It's not about buts, it's about ands, meaning that the first thing you have to say is what happened on October the 7th is unacceptable. It was a terrorist attack, and we stand firmly on Israel's side, and we strongly support the legitimate right of self-defense within the international humanitarian law. And then there should come no but, there should come an and we care about the suffering of the civilians, of the women, of the children, and we are, as close friends, in a good discussion with our Israelis about, okay, what could be done to protect the civilian population? What could be done to end this war? What could be done to defeat Hamas, not only militarily, also politically? And what could be a long-term solution for a sustainable and just peace in the region?
Well,
I think you could clap for that, by the way.
Feel invited.
That's a pretty strong statement there.
But still, as you have just said, that you also need to talk about the plight of the Palestinians. And we've heard the German government calling for restraint and for the utmost care in waging this war, and yet trying to spare the lives of the innocent in Gaza. Do you have the feeling that the Israel Defense Forces are actually doing their utmost to protect civilians?
So first of all, it's like among friends. Our Israeli friends, they are listening. We ask them tough questions, and I believe it's necessary to ask tough questions. But, you know, we are trying to find ways and means. And it's crystal clear, Israel is fighting Hamas, not the Palestinians. So it's our common challenge how to see, okay, how can the situation of the civilian population being improved with more humanitarian aid being accessible to the Gaza Strip, being fairly distributed to the people, and at the same time, you know, the people in Gaza, and there are refugees, internally displaced people now in Rafah, they cannot disappear. So it's for sure, it's an obligation to see how the civilian population, especially in Rafah, can be protected at the most. That's no contradiction to say for sure Israel has the right of self-defense, and I can understand. I was in the kibbutz Be'eri together with President Steinmeier and President Herzog. I've seen with my own eyes, and I've smelled
with your own nose.
Honestly what happened.
Yeah.
And you know that's the starting point in all our discussions. When speaking about humanitarian situation, when speaking about international humanitarian law, we mustn't forget what happened on October the 7th. And going out on the street, not only in Berlin, for me it's a little bit frightening how short memory of many people is. But personally, I believe I can understand that the people, especially in the Gaza envelope, that they cannot go back to status quo ante. And at the same time, we need to do more for the civilians.
Right. Yep.
And let me make one last comment. I believe it's also in the interest of Israel and especially of the IDF. You can only sustain your fight against Hamas if you show to the public that you do the utmost to protect the civilians.
Right. I think the IDF tries. They're not always, succeeding, but hopefully, they will do a better job. You mentioned actually the displaced. Just to add, there's hundreds of thousands of Israelis who are also displaced within their countries. So, it's not only the Gazans who are displaced.
That's what I'm urging
100%.
for, that we should be able to get into the perspective
100%.
of the different sides. And
yeah.
If I would live in a country where people are evacuated from the Gaza envelope as well as from the northern border, I can imagine the discussions.
Yeah. We spoke about the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian people. And the German government has been very persistent on the two-state solution. Now, even before October 7th, there was pretty much, I would say, a majority in Israel which did not support this type of a deal. But even more so, all surveys after October 7th, not supporting, it's not even on the table. Or, obviously we're still in mourning, but even, politically, intellectually, it's not something that's being discussed. So how do you explain the, that gap between, and as a country that's very involved, like you've been to all the places, your ministers have been everywhere. How do you explain the gap between the way, your government sees this and, the people of Israel who see it in a very different way?
I fully understand going to Israel, and not only speaking to the government or to the parliamentarians, but also speaking to the people. I fully understand that their first concern at the moment is their security. I fully understand that. And going back to my speech in Manama, where I said we owe a special responsibility for Israel's security, we need to have a debate what security in the long run means. Germany, our government, we are convinced that a two-state solution in the long run is the only way for a just and sustainable peace in the region. That's what I'm trying to explain. And we all know that when the military operation comes to an end, we have to be creative about the day after. And I believe the issue with the day after is closely linked to the long-run perspective. And I see
to making a deal also now.
To making a deal. But you cannot speak about the day after in an isolated scenario. If you do that, then I believe the Arab world is not willing to buy in. And what we need for peace in the region, what we need for Israelis to live in safety on the long run, is a buy-in of the whole region.
Right. So you mentioned walking on the streets here in Berlin and seeing things that you wouldn't expect to be seeing. And I wanted to ask to relate to that. So, the previous Chancellor Merkel was, the government was very active in allowing and encouraging immigration of people from Middle Eastern countries and North African countries to Germany. And I think, from someone that's been covering, anti-Semitism in Germany for many years, most of the anti-Semitic incidents are not coming from people who have, German roots. It's actually coming from immigrants. And I'm wondering, how can you, as a country, take care of that situation? Because people who immigrated from Syria were actually educated that Jews are bad people, or stereotypes that used to exist here during the Holocaust are, daily in their papers and their caricatures, etc.
So, first thing, we shouldn't be naive, and I'm not naive. You're totally right. People from countries where they learned at school to hate and to kill Jews now live in our country. And for sure, that's a challenge. And at the same time, honestly, at some point, I don't care. Every case of anti-Semitism is one case too much. And we should apply the same requirements, the same conditions to everyone who lives here in that country, whether he's German or an immigrant, whether he's Christian, Jewish, or Muslim. In the end, every case is one too much. For sure, we have certain challenges, and we should think about measures, as Marco Buschmann pointed out, with respect to applying for German citizenship and all those things. But in the end, I believe if you say anti-Semitism is one of the core violations of the UN Charter, one of the core violations of human rights, we need to do it in the way that we say we apply the same standards, the same conditions to everyone who is living here in that country.
Okay, thank you for that.
And one last question on the conflict and its wider context. We know that Iran is a major factor that's also behind Hamas. And one of the news that got overlooked in the last days was that, according to new estimates, Iran is just one more week away from nuclear weapons capability. Germany has long argued for negotiating with Iran. Isn't it time to change course?
So to be blunt, there are no negotiations on the JCPOA going on at the moment. What we, and not only Germans, also Americans, British friends, French, what we are trying to find out is Iran willing to de-escalate or not? We all share the same goal, to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. There are more steps for sure necessary, from the enriched material to a nuclear missile. We all know that. But that's no excuse. Iran's behavior with respect to the nuclear file, but also with respect to their behavior in the whole region, is very concerning, urgently concerning. It needs to be stopped. And Iran now needs to show if they are willing to de-escalate, not only with respect to nuclear things, but if they are willing to de-escalate with respect to Lebanon, to Yemen.
And what if they are not?
You know, government officials usually don't answer questions that start with what if. But I promise you, we are in close contact with our Israeli partners as well as with our American partners and inside Europe. And we are making very clear to Iran that they need to stop.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Tobias Lindner.
Thank you so much, Minister.
All the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Zvika. Before we move on to our next panel, I would like to ask one of the participants up here to my place to discuss one question that has also been a burning issue between Germany and Israel, the question of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, in short UNRWA. Sharon Haskell, member of Knesset from the New Hope Party, who is Minister Gideon Sa'ar you have just met. Please come over. Sharon, you've been heading the UNRWA caucus inside the Knesset for quite a while, and now there is an official investigation into UNRWA and the affiliation with Hamas of a lot of their employees. And how far do you think that's a structural problem inside the organization or more the employees that work for it?
So the organization of UNRWA, these are not just a few bad apples. This is an organization that's rotten to its core. It sits at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And as long as this organization exists, you will not find any other result than what was until today for the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. What we are finding now as full evidence, because our troops are there and they can collect them, they can photograph them, are things that we've knew for years. I mean, look, in 2005, we warned UNRWA that one of the principals of the school and the head of the UNRWA unions of teachers is in fact Hamas spokesperson. They've ignored it for 10 years. It took them 10 years in a very extreme act for them to actually fire that person. If you look on UNRWA today, they're actually a long arm and managed by Hamas. About 5,000 of their employees.
The whole of the organization?
We know prior to the information that we've collected, where we know these days that, for example, military personnel of Hamas weren't registered as Hamas in order to avoid the Israeli intelligence. That's just an example. So from lists and crossing lists between UNRWA workers prior to a lot of the information that we collected, we know of 5,000 workers of UNRWA that are either Hamas or Hamas first family members, okay, meaning their wives or their children or their brothers and sisters. About 1,200 of them are high-ranked Hamas. We know of more than 120 that are military Hamas.
So what to do?
Does
it mean dissolving UNRWA, as we've heard from so many voices in Israel?
In the long term, yes. If you want to see a better future for Israelis and Palestinians, definitely. And you have to divide it. I mean, I know many people speak about the humanitarian issue, but you need to understand that UNRWA doesn't look only after the humanitarian issue. And if we really want Palestinians, poor Gazan citizens who are in desperate need of food and shelter, it cannot go through UNRWA because the equipment and the humanitarian aids that go through UNRWA goes directly to Hamas, and that goes into the markets. They sell the tents for 2,000 shekels, they sell the flour for 200 shekels, the sugar for 100 shekels. They're profiting from the humanitarian aid because it goes directly to the pockets of Hamas.
But then if you do acknowledge the humanitarian needs in the Gaza Strip, what do you reply to those who say that this push to dissolve UNRWA is actually in line with what these critics of the Israeli warfare say is a mass killing of civilians and taking away the humanitarian rights of the civilians? How fulfill these humanitarian needs without UNRWA?
So you need to understand, we want the humanitarian aid to reach the Gazan citizens. We want that. Those images, the heartbreaking images, we don't want that. And we want to be able to operate against Hamas. We understand also that humanitarian crisis is a challenge for us as well. And so what needs to happen is that UNDAC, the United Nations agency, needs to create a plan like it did in Syria, like it did in Afghanistan, in Sudan, with millions of refugees, far greater a disastrous area or war zone than what we see now in Gaza, and build a plan that OCHA can come in and spread its umbrella, and we can arrange it maybe in the north of Gaza or wherever OCHA decide, in order for international humanitarian workers that are really experiencing that come in and give that humanitarian aid directly to the Palestinians, not Hamas.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Let's walk over to the stage and welcome our other panelists.
Thank you.
And my other panelists who are just walking up, for the sake of saving time, I'll start introducing them while they are still walking. You've just met Sharon Haskell. Next to her, we are very glad to welcome Stephen Erlanger of the New York Times, Chief Diplomatic Correspondent in Europe, and formerly Jerusalem Bureau Chief. Next to him is Melody Suchayevic. Welcomes Melody. Melody is a political consultant and communication expert who has unparalleled insights in both Germany and Israel, because she has lived in both. And last but by no means least, Christian Buck, the head of the Director General of that's the correct title, the Director General for Political Affairs, and especially for Africa, Latin America, the Near and Middle East. Thank you for all of you for participating tonight. And after we've talked a bit on the stage, I would also like you, the audience, to participate and also ask questions to our panelists. And I would actually like to ask Christian Buck first. You, as one of the top diplomats of the German government for the Middle East, what do you think when you hear Sharon talk about a United Nations body such as UNRWA and her prospects?
Thank you. We are very concerned, as we should be, and we are particularly concerned that it has been discovered that some of the officials of UNRWA have in fact participated in the horrible acts of terror of October 7th. So this is, of course, utterly unacceptable. It is for anyone, let alone for a member of a United Nations mission. And the organization and the Secretary General has done the right thing, has immediately terminated any affiliation with these persons as a first step, and has an issue. No.
It's not your fault.
Good. And of course, this is not enough. We need to know what else there is. We need to shed light at the entire organization, at each and every employee of the organization, at the way it uses its finances. And this is why the organization and the Secretary General have initiated several layers of audit, including a new organization chaired by former French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna, to look deeply into this organization and find out what else we didn't know before, and find out hard evidence and draw conclusions. And until we see such conclusions, we have, as have other donors, suspended our contribution to this organization to see really what we are having there. Having said that, we hear the criticism of UNRWA, but most humanitarian workers, including the head of OCHA, of the UN Organization for Humanitarian Aid, says, for the moment, UNRWA is irreplaceable. No organization can do what it does, whether it's 3,000 employees in Gaza, close to 200 of which have died during the campaign, with its affiliates in Lebanon and Jordan. Nobody could take this job in the short run, at least. And this is what we find. And we have, at the same time, to provide for the more than 2 million people of Gaza, to provide for the refugees in Lebanon and in Jordan. If we wouldn't do that, there would be a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and there would be probably widespread political upheaval in the other regions.
All right. Melody, as you know both these countries so well, and we're now seeing on this stage that despite this solidarity in Germany for Israel from the German government, there are pretty stark differences both in the big questions, such as the two-state solution, as well as in the immediate questions, such as UNRWA. Do you have the feeling that these differences between Israel and Germany, also on a societal level, are they growing? And why are there these differences? And if they are growing in your view, why are they?
These differences have always been there. Throughout the past decades, where we saw an incredible process of normality or normalization in German-Israeli relations, there always have been those differences. But I think that October 7th is an opportunity, if not an imperative, to change or let go of a couple of outdated paradigms. And you just mentioned, and before I go on, I want to say that whatever the differences are, the solidarity, the unwavering support that I personally have experienced from the German government and all of the authorities over the past couple of months, especially accompanying the families of the hostages, really makes me proud as a German Jew and an Israeli. And I want to thank everybody, also the ones here in this hall, to do this. Going back to the paradigms that are really probably outdated and need to be revamped, I want to look at the two-state solution, not necessarily from the prism of German-Israeli relations, but from the prism of the free world, of which obviously Germany is a part, and the prism of German strategic interests. The two-state solution, when it was developed for a Middle East that doesn't exist anymore today. It changed drastically over the past 20 years, and things that may have been relevant 20 years ago are no longer relevant anymore today. But more than that, shifting the focus from a clear condemnation of Hamas after October 7th, from demanding Hamas to lay down their weapons, leave Gaza, and allow people in the area a better future, to the two-state solution is a little bit, allow me to be provocative, is a little bit like the Allied forces after the Second World War handing Poland to Nazi Germany as a present. It will be seen as a reward and a victory for Hamas 4 months after October 7th. Another aspect that is problematic is the fact that the two-state solution, or this kind of approach of pressuring Israel right now to move on to a diplomatic process pretty much, sends the wrong messages to the extremists that are also in Germany, that see this kind of approach as weakness at this stage, while Hamas is still holding Israeli hostages. And last but not least, one point, right now, to have a two-state solution or a Palestinian entity, you need somebody on the other side of the negotiation table who is willing to accept that the other side on the table actually has a right to exist. And as long as a majority of not only the leadership, but also Palestinians themselves, a majority do not see that future and actually think that what Hamas did to Jews on October 7th is good, 80% in the West Bank, 70% in Gaza. As long as that's the case, speaking of a two-state solution is a little bit more of wishful thinking and a little bit less of accepting the reality the way it is.
I would like to, feel free. I would like to widen the scope a bit, because, Stephen, all these questions that we are discussing here, as if Germany and Israel were alone to be interested and to decide upon that. they're also on the minds of many Americans and especially of Jewish Americans. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit on how American Jewry looks at this conflict and how this factor could be a factor also in the upcoming election campaign.
I don't know is the right answer. It's what journalists ought to say more often. There is a lot of real disquiet over the conduct of this war. There is not a huge question over the justification of the war, but how it is being fought and how it's going to end and how long it's going to take and how many victims there will be. There is a major split, particularly among young Jews in America, who grew up not only after the Six-Day War, but grew up after the Oslo Accords, after Rabin's assassination. They have a very different view of an Israel that, in my experience, because I've been there a lot, has become, since 2005, certainly more right-wing, less liberal, less tolerant, and even in some degree more racist about Arabs and Palestinians. So there is a division, there's a disquiet, and in Israel there's a trauma and a numbness, because October 7th was a trauma.
And you've just traveled there.
Yeah, I've spent, since October 7th, I've spent more than 2 months there. And I've been all over Israel and all over the West Bank, and I know Gaza very well. I've been in Gaza 2002, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14, all those wars. Of course, we're not allowed into Gaza now, which is part of the problem. There's no press allowed, which always makes you, as a journalist, think things are being hidden from you because you're not allowed, because people don't want you to see things. But the trauma is real and the numbness is real. And the only thing I come away always feeling is I've been in places where the sense of victimhood has driven out the ability of others to recognize other victims. And this is what I fear. The fact is, most of the people in Gaza are twice victims. First of Hamas, which is a very repressive organization, and second from the war, which they didn't start and by and large have had nothing to do with. They live above ground, Hamas lives by and large underground. So all I'm saying is don't close your hearts to what's happening there, whatever the justification for the war. The war is just, the conduct we'll see. There are elements that disturb me, that disturb many American Jews. And the other problem is, of course, it's a complicated war, it's a complicated story, it's a complicated history, and there's no clear idea of how this war ends. Thank you.
I think that's a notion that we all in this hall share, that the future seems very unpredictable. And before we'll take questions from the audience, as our schedule is already a bit advanced, Sharon, I have to ask you one very big question to be answered in very little time. Whenever I hear this statement that a two-state solution is dead, and if you look around, there are many reasons to think so, I wonder from those people who say that, if it's dead, then what? What solution is there that can also guarantee the human and democratic rights of the Palestinians?
A very short question and a
Yes.
very quick answer. It's a
We'll
$1
solve
million
it tonight,
question.
I'm sure.
Yeah, for us. And look, if you look on what happened in Gaza, that is the two-state solution that exploded in our face. Okay, it's a two-state solution that completely failed. I mean, we evacuated Gaza in 2005 from every single living Jew, not a single one. All the forces were evacuated out as well.
So it doesn't work either.
But what happened there? You know, instead of thriving and building like a Singapore or Hong Kong, it turned into a terrorist, an ISIS state of radical Islam. And so you need to understand that this generation, there isn't. It cannot happen. And so we need to start thinking outside of the box. I mean, there's different ideas about small community leadership, like a tribal kind of leadership. And there's talks about the international community. I mean, the fact that some leaders and people from the international community say that UNRWA doesn't have a replacement is not because there isn't a solution for the humanitarian aid that can be facilitated for Palestinians through the United Nations, but it is because UNRWA has been working for 75 years as a parallel government to the Palestinian leadership. UNRWA's, it's supplying the education system and the healthcare system and the housing, the skyscrapers and the villas that you see in those refugee camps built and planned by UNRWA, up to the point where the street cleaners are UNRWA workers. And so, in that sense, instead of trying to think how, okay, if you need that parallel government that the international community is funding, then make the decision on what kind of future you want to build for the Palestinian and how this power is going to pass to a Palestinian leadership. Make the decision, because it is your money, to stop a radical Islamist education system. Make sure that the leadership and the managers in UNRWA are international workers, so Hamas doesn't take over, that they don't steal the money, that they don't steal the equipment. Make sure that when you speak of a healthcare, the hospitals don't turn into Hamas military bases. I mean, it's the simplest, most basic things that needs to happen if the international community is funding that. And I would ask you what the international community is willing to say to build this future, maybe, leadership for Palestinians.
That definitely is a great question. If there are more great questions in the room, please point out. Tatiana Ohm will bring over a mic. We have one question here. Maybe we can collect one more, if there is.
Yeah, we have to be a bit German about the time. We have only 5 minutes. I knew it. Wait, hang on. How am I going? May I just...
Thank you. Jessica Schön from Christians for Israel. I have a question to Mr. Book. Audit reforms and reviews, we hear that from UNRWA for years and about UNRWA. UNRWA has now been caught red-handed. What else does it take for UNRWA to lose German support? The argument of no viable alternative is just not satisfactory in face of UNRWA working hands in glove with Hamas. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tatiana, unless you've seen more than I've seen, I saw a question here in the first row.
Running?
Don't trip.
If you have an accident, that won't save us time. So please relax.
Who would like? Oh.
That's over here, exactly.
Hi, thank you. What is the...
Please introduce yourself.
Okay.
Sorry.
My name is Rafael Zamir. I live here in Berlin, Twenfield. Of course, Jew Israeli, which left and live here to Twenfield, as I mentioned. And my question is, how do you see the chances that Egypt will take responsibility on the Palestinian in the Gaza side? And how do you see the chances that Jordan will take responsibility on the Palestinian in the west side? And why, actually?
Maybe, Christian Buck, we might start with you, because there was a direct question to you. And as I understand, Stephen, you have some thoughts on Egypt and Jordan, right? So please, Christian Buck, reply to the question about UNRWA.
Thank you very much.
What's the red line?
Of course, we will want to make sure that the financing that we give to any organization is not misused for terror purposes. Now, this has become more acute with the information that we have now, and we will seek an investigation by these organizations to ensure that. And of course, we are looking for alternative possibilities, but in the moment there seem to be none. As I mentioned, the head of UNRWA, the head of OCHA, which is the closest alternative, Martin Griffith, has already said so. So it is a practical question. Right now, our payments are suspended. And to the question to Egypt and Jordan, the peace partners, the traditional peace partners of Israel are absolutely needed, I think, for the security of Israel. However, they have made clear that they will not, accept an externalization of the Palestinian question into their countries. So I think a displacement of Palestinians to these countries cannot be the solution of the conflict.
Thank you. Christian Buck, Stephen Erlanger.
I was just going to answer the second question. Sisi hates the Muslim Brotherhood.
The president of Egypt.
Hamas is not of Mexico.
Sometimes this, sometimes that.
Hamas is affiliated to the Muslim Brotherhood. He doesn't want to be responsible for being charged with accepting another Nakba. He's also wiped out, rather brutally, radical Islam in the Sinai. He doesn't want to import more of it. And frankly, if you'd ask the King of Jordan privately how many more Palestinians he wants inside Jordan, he would say, no, thank you very much.
Sharon Haskell.
I might just add to what was said. I won't have my expectation high at all. I mean, for 75 years, there's been UNRWA refugee camps, Palestinians, hundreds of thousands, none of them been resettled in Jordan. So I won't expect some kind of a change in their policy. And on the other hand, with Egypt, I completely understand them. I mean, the number one exportation from Gaza to Egypt is ISIS soldiers. I mean, those terrorist attacks that you see on military bases and on churches and on mosques, a lot of them are being made by ISIS soldiers who are being exported from Gaza. So I can't get my hopes on that at all.
Thank you very much, Sharon Haskell. Thank you all for your attention. I think we have at least gotten some more overview of the problems at hand, even though we weren't able to solve them tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Today, family members of hostages flew to The Hague to file an official complaint against Hamas at the ICC. The nightmare that these families are facing is beyond words. Meirav Leshem Gonen is still forced to go through this nightmare every single day. Her beautiful daughter, Romi, was kidnapped on October 7th by Hamas and has been in captivity for more than 130 days. Thanks to the help of Oz Ventures, we were able to bring Meirav here with us tonight to tell us the story of what happened to her daughter and to tell us how she believes and the world needs to do in order to help to get her daughter out of captivity. Meirav, please join me on the stage. As we said, it's been more than 130 days since Romi was kidnapped by Hamas. There is a recording that has been played on many news stations of your beautiful daughter. I just want to get up and make sure everybody knows who she is. You see the beautiful blonde, number 5 in from the top? That's Romi. Romi was at the Nova Music Festival dancing and having a wonderful time until Hamas infiltrated into Israel. Tell me the story.
Good evening. Romi is a wonderful child. She's my third one. I have 5 kids. She's my third one. She's lovely, smiley, full of energy. She was a dancer. She was working now as a waitress to make her living and also to go for the next trip to I don't know, South America. This is one of the places. She has a lot of friends, She's like a leader. She always says what she thinks, and a real sabra. And she was working on Friday, and then she and Gaia Khalifa, her best friend, were going. Sorry, I'm a little bit, I'm the only mother as in a role of a mother here. Everybody here knows, strategic and things. I'm a mother. They were going to the festival, and they arrived to the festival at 4:38. They were sending a message to tell us that they arrived and that everything is okay. And at 6:35, the nightmare began. She called me. She was terrified. She said, "Mommy, there are rockets. I don't know what to do." I was in the center of Israel. All my kids, all my other kids were at their father's house in Kfar Vadim. This is at the north of Israel. And she was frightened. She was crying. She didn't know what to do. And we were talking on the phone. And then she called her elder sister, Yarden, and also discussing with her what to do, where to go. There is no shelter. This is an open place, a beautiful place in Re'im. And we were with her on the phone or on WhatsApp and following her, whatever she did. The rockets didn't stop. They were trying to find the car. They tried to run away with the car. They just, went to maybe 1 or 2 kilometers from the party, and then they started hearing shootings around them, and people were running and screaming, "Get out of the car because they are going to kill us." And they were going to the ditch and trying to hide behind the bush. And she sent me a message saying, "Mommy, I cannot talk because they can hear me." This is something, we read in Holocaust books. And we were trying to help her. We were trying to call the police, and nothing worked. And then she said, "Well, a good friend of Gaia is coming back again to rescue us." He also already took 8 people out of there. And I was a little bit relieved. And at 10:05, she called me and said, "Mommy, he's here. We are going." And I was, okay, wonderful. And then I got the phone call at 10:14, starting with the words, "Mommy, I was shot. I'm bleeding, and I think I'm going to die. Gaia is not answering, and the driver is dead." And from that moment, 45 minutes of a phone call that I felt so helpless. I couldn't help her. We called the police and nobody answered. We tried to find somebody to take them out of there. And at a certain point, I understood that we cannot help her. And that if she's going to die or being kidnapped because we heard the shooting around and we didn't know what is going to be, at least she will hear my voice and know that I love her, that we love her, that she's not alone, and that I'm with her. And I started saying things just to make sure she will be relieved. And then I heard the shooting come closer. I heard them shouting over my daughter's head in Arabic, a lot of men, opening the door, going into the car, trying to start it, and then taking her out. Later on, we understood that they took her, she has a long hair, they took her out brutally from the head, dragging her on the floor as if she was a doll. And when she tried to see what is going on, they just, punched her in her face, and she had for some times
Meirav,
a bruise.
Since that time, we've had one hostage exchange. People came out of Gaza, but your daughter did not. The army continues to fight, going further and further into the Gaza Strip. Are you afraid? Do you trust what is happening with the IDF in Gaza?
First, I'm afraid a little bit sometimes. I try to put the fear aside because I think my daughter needs me strong. She needs me to be full of energy to work and make sure she's going out. I trust my army. I trust them that the main issue that stands before their eyes is the life of my daughter and all the other, it's not hostages, sorry, it's kidnapped people. We have to keep that word because hostages is something totally different. But all the hostages, all the kidnapped that are still alive, and the bodies of the other people that already were murdered, I know it stands before their eyes. So I trust them. I trust that they're doing whatever they can also to protect the Palestinian inside, because as was already said, the war is against Hamas. It's not against the Palestinian people.
But how do you have the strength to get up, to rally every day for your daughter who was kidnapped and for the others who are there?
I see the good that happens around us. We at first were alone, us as a family, and then my kids and their father, my partner, their father's partner, we came together and started working on making sure that everybody will hear the story and help us. And then almost not even 2 days after the 7th of October, all the families of the kidnapped were together. So it's, you know, it's like one big family. You talked about Gabriela that was supposed to come here. I know her. I know also the people that came back. I know all of them. First, I have a mission. My daughter has to come back, and she's still alive, and she has to come back. And all the other people, that our beloved ones that are still there. So there isn't any other opportunity. And I see the good in people, and I see how people understand their role and their responsibility to make sure this world will be a better place, a brighter place, a peaceful place. And I see it, you know, like growing in circles. It's a bigger and bigger circle of people and nations that come to help, not to Israel, but for the good in people, for the light. And we know that together the light is bigger, and then we can fight and defeat the evil.
You know, you mentioned Gabriela, and she was supposed to be here with you today. She was also a hostage herself inside Gaza. She was kidnapped with 4 family members. 3 of them, the 3 women, were let out, her daughter and her sister, back in November. But her brother and her sister's partner remains in Gaza. I spoke to Gabriela at 4:30 p.m. on Sunday evening, and 12 hours later at 4:30 a.m., she told me on the call what it was like to be out while her family was in. And 12 hours later, those 2 people who were released were her brother, and it wasn't even released. It was saved. It was rescued by the IDF. It was a miracle. It can happen. It can happen.
So I don't see it as a miracle, but as the right of a nation like Israel to make sure that it uses all the options to bring people back. One of them is a military option, but we understand it's not the only one. We have diplomacy. We have other possibilities to bring them back. One of them was this week, and the other, the bigger one, was by diplomatic negotiations. So I expect my country, but not just my country, because it's not, you know, we're so global now. It's not that Israel can do it by itself. It's not possible anymore. It's a lot of connections between the other parties, not just us and Hamas. It's Egypt that is working. It's Qatar that is also working. It's USA, and it's Germany, and it's France, and a lot of other countries around the world that really understand that this is bigger than just Israel, Hamas. You know that Hamas was saying to one of the women that came back, he said, "Oh, Israel, this just on the way, because we intend for the whole world. Oh, you have a nationality, German nationality? Oh, too bad. We have Hamas also in German." And, you know, hearing that, it's the understanding that it's not just the Israel problem or the Palestinians themselves, it's the problem of the whole world.
And speaking of that, as we get ready to conclude, you came here today to share your story, to help to make people remember what happened on October 7th, and to hopefully affect change. But you have a much bigger message, a message about good versus evil, a message that you need to relay to Germany and to the rest of the world, not only about your own daughter, but about their responsibility to fight terror. Share your final sentiments with us.
I think when we find in ourselves the possibility to look at the other and understand that he needs something from us, that it's not only our needs, but also the needs of the other side. And we are able not just to decide that we know the best and only our cause is the right one. This is the place where we can start talking. I feel that sometimes with the WhatsApp and the social media, we can write things about each other which are horrible. And you can see also the videos and the talkbacks. I'm not going into the social media from 7th of October. And I do believe that people need to sit together and start talking, but talking from a point of view of I'm listening to you and hearing you, because I am sure that if we will decide that we will beat the evilness, it will only be possible by talking first or listening first, talking and deciding to join it together. Because as I said, the light is bigger when we do it together. And that's why I want to say thank you. I know that the ambassador of Qatar is here and all our friends in Germany to say thank you, because you're taking responsibility not just for Israel. Israel is one, but you're taking responsibility for the whole world to make sure it is a better place for my daughter, for my kids, but also for your kids, for the next generations. It will not stop here. We need it to go on and make sure and those people, our beloved ones that are still held by those Hamas, by those terrorists, by those rapers and murderers, these people, when they will come back, this will be one of the signs that we are a better and improved society. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Stay on the stage, if you don't mind, Meirav. Meirav, stay on the stage. I want to call up Sheikh Abdullah bin Mohammed bin Saad Al Thani, Qatar's ambassador to Germany. But before he is interviewed by our editor-in-chief, Svika Klein, I want to call Meirav back onto the stage to take a picture with this ambassador and with our editor-in-chief, so that afterwards they will also have a discussion and be able to speak about how to affect change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador. It's not a given that we are sitting here today. If I'm not mistaken, this is probably the first time that a Qatari official is participating in a conference jointly organized by an Israeli news outlet. And obviously, you met Meirav, and we heard about her daughter. You are part of the royal family. You have been active personally in trying and actually succeeding to get hostages back home. What's going to be?
Look, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me and speaking to distinguished people here. I know familiar faces here. I listened, to Romi mother here, before, and I met many families, just to come and talk to me. And
How many families have you met?
I lost count. But all in all, I met 5 or 6 times, a group.
Right.
And our friend here helped us in organizing a meeting. And I used really to sit and listen, understand the situation. And I do try to help from my side and to raise their names, to the team who is working on solving the problem and mediating, so to help to release those names, because they are here, they are around me, and I would like to help as much as I could, as my country does, really in the last few months now.
So have you individually, as an embassy and as an ambassador, have you directly been involved in the release of Israeli citizens?
We helped. I can say we helped in releasing, yes, by sending the names and putting them in the list, because sometimes names could be lost and no one could hear about them. But our embassy in DC has done the same. In London did the same, and so here in Berlin, and we are all together, cultivating our effort to achieve a result.
So my question is basically: would Hamas treat or take more seriously a request from a Qatari official on a hostage than just someone else?
The point of contact that we have, the political office in Doha, is a real facilitator for us to communicate, because there's no way of other way of communicating with the people in Gaza or the Hamas leader. So through the office in Doha, which has been there, by the request of the United States to support and make a point of contact so that we can facilitate. This office helped actually many times in de-escalating, in ceasefire in 21 and in 2008, and many times helped in creating a sort of an understanding of the situation before it erupts. And that's our aim, is to keep this situation calm and peaceful as we could, through this contact, point of contact.
So yesterday, there were talks in Cairo, and your Prime Minister also participated. There was a meeting today. Prime Minister Netanyahu actually told his delegation not to return to Cairo because he was quoted saying in his statement saying that there was no deal to be discussed, and therefore he did not send his delegation back. So what is actually on the table?
Look, everything happened last night, and it was until late last night, and still I didn't get the full information that normally we communicate with our team. But my feeling from the news I heard from the media, that it's been in Egypt and in the Arab world, that there is a sort of a progress, that it is moving in the good direction. And the only thing that I do really hope is just to keep this discussion going, because without keeping this going on, we are not going to get anywhere.
But what's holding the deal back? Because obviously it's been in discussion. There were different, I would say most of the sides agree. So who is holding it back? What is holding it back?
Look, I think everybody is part of this, process that is happening. My personal, I'm not involved in the daily,
right,
and in the communication always. But my instinct tell me that maybe it's a lack of trust. Maybe it's a lack of communication sometimes, because, to get now the information and to get the communication going, just, becoming more and more difficult. And as you know, the whole area is now under the, the mandate or the hand of the IDF. So it's difficult to communicate. Communication is not working. But also, I believe trust is one thing.
Is Hamas the more difficult player?
I can't tell, because really, if everything is not moving in the right direction, there is something is not going right, either on this side or this. I'm now, I just heard it from you now that Netanyahu is not sending the delegation back, which for me, I didn't want this to happen. I wanted at least the communication to continue, because without communication, how can we, get to the bottom of it?
Right. A majority of Israelis, and we discussed this earlier, don't believe there is any way to achieve a two-state solution. Obviously, there needs to be some sort of a solution, right? And I'm wondering, in some sort of theoretical solution that someone will have to be thinking of at a certain point, what role will Qatar play in this? Not only as, a mediator and maybe funding certain, elements, but because there's a lot of criticism towards Qatar about a number of things, whether it's, the way Israel and the Jewish people are reported on Al Jazeera in a very anti-Semitic way. And, antisemitism attributed to, to influence of Qatari funds, etc. Is there anything Qatar will do in that sort of a peace agreement that will be a broad regional plan?
Look, let me put everything into prospect, because your question has got so many elements in it, and I'm trying to. I wish I brought my card with me so that I can follow you with the question. But look,
I can remind you. Don't worry.
Okay, remind me if I do not answer the question. But look, when Qatar opened the office of the political office in Doha, it was a point of contact for creating peace and stability in the region. That's number one. Number two, our region deserves better, deserves to live in harmony and coexistence and enjoy the economical growth. We can't just see the whole world is growing while we are in a tension all the time. That's number two. Every time we intervene for the good of the cause and for the reason of to de-escalate the situation and find a way of peace. Now, if you ask me, Al Jazeera is, from my point of view, is a platform that does not make the story, rather than I watch Fox News, I watch CNN, I watch Al Jazeera,
and Welt.
And the Welt, of course, since I've been here. Since I've been here. By the way, thank you for hosting us. The Jerusalem Post and the Welt. Sorry, I didn't mention this, but I see all those platforms, and I can weigh, and I understand. Every channel has its own. Program and their way of dealing with the news. But the thing that I could always refer to is that Al Jazeera, at least when it broadcasts something about the region, it brings someone from the Israeli side, either the speaker of the IDF or someone from the government or someone from the think tank that contradict what is going on or the other part. So we give the floor to the Israeli side to explain their way, their thinking or their thought of what's going on. So all in all, look, we in Qatar is a peace-loving nation. We want peace and prosperity in the region. Our cornerstone in the whole in our foreign policy is to promote peace. You see us in, and our track record talks about it. It's a trademark that we are really pivotal in bringing peace into the region. Look to Afghanistan. That is a success. Look at the deal between Iran and the USA. USA and Venezuela, and Djibouti, and
we're short of time.
So really, this is what we are trying to do, is just to keep the peace going on. And that is really becoming a flagship to Qatar and the trade.
100%. So we're just over time, but there's actually an anecdote I thought would be interesting for this audience. When you were part of the Air Force, you're a pilot, and a number of years ago, many years ago, you were in the Army War School. War College.
Pennsylvania, USA.
In Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And who was your classmate?
General Gadi Eisenkot.
Gadi Eisenkot. Chief of Staff of the Israeli Army?
He's a friend. He was a colleague in the school. I know him. I know his family. I visited him in his office, and we had lunch together. And he gave me a nice tour, by the way. I always keep a good memory with.
And his son was killed
I know
during the war, as well as his nephew.
I was really, heartfelt, of this news, and I paid my condolences, and he accepted it, and I have, a link always with him, and this is a friendship, and I will keep it.
Right. So we are over time.
Yeah.
And they're going to be mad at me, but I am going to ask just one more question.
Go ahead.
When are we going to see...
Trust me, they will not go mad at you.
What?
They're not going to go mad at you.
You never know.
Although I have a plane to catch to go to Munich.
We'll keep you here for a while. When are we going to see our hostages back home?
Look, from the way you see how Qatar is putting all its effort, our Prime Minister is shuttling between the US, Egypt, and Paris. You've seen he's receiving massive phone calls, and he's having so many meetings every day in the agenda. Now, as I'm going to Munich, I can tell you half of the request I can't fulfill it because of the of the timing. He is putting all the effort. The whole ministry is putting an effort. We have a situation room where there are so many people that are on their toes, around the clock, working. And, happily, I could say, we succeeded sometime. And I hope this is going to happen. And we are going to see the release as soon as possible. We all hope for it. We all wish for it. And we keep our finger crossed.
Okay. So my request is, after this, the Munich conference, do whatever you can. That is my request in order for us to see them home. And let's restart and think of a new future in the Middle East.
Thank you so much. I might mention just before the meeting that our region deserves much better. Our kids want to go to a better education, to live a good life. And everybody feel the same. And that's what we wish for, and we wish for a peaceful solution, coexistent with everybody.
Inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you.
When Hamas launched its attack against Israel on October 7th, the brave men and women of Magen David Adom, Israel's national emergency medical services organization, risked their lives to save the lives of others. Magen David Adom first responders operated under rocket fire, and they operated under gunfire. Magen David Adom is unique in that it is a diverse organization with Jews, Christians, and Muslims working together in order to save lives in Israel. I want to first show you a video of the work that they did on October 7th for you to better understand who this organization is. Please.
Introducing one of Israel's national emergency organization, Magen David Adom, the National Rescue Organization, Hatzalah. As you may not have known, Magen David Adom was established in 1930, even before the establishment of the State of Israel. Today, it's part of Israel's national resilience at the forefront of technological, human, and professional advancements. All with one goal, to be on the first line, from the first second, to save lives. Magen David Adom operates with 30,000 volunteers and 3,000 employees from various sectors. They operate over 1,400 ambulances and additional life-saving vehicles, including medicycles, blood mobiles, rapid response vehicles, boats and helicopters all over the country. Magen David Adom responds to 2 million calls each year. Every 38 seconds on average, an ambulance dispatched to save lives. Saving lives begins with a phone call to a medical professional at the emergency call center. With a response of 1 to 3 seconds, utilize a world-leading advanced technological system developed by MDA. Additionally, MDA operates one of Israel's strategic locations, the blood bank.
The Magen David Adom Blood Services collect about 270,000 units, so we can save about 1 million people every year.
On October 7th, Magen David Adom teams were the first to treat victims in the areas hit by the savage attack of Hamas. 4 of them paid with their lives. 3 of them were taken captive by Hamas, and many others were injured, all with the aim of saving lives.
מגן דוד אדום הוא הזרוע הביצועית להצלת חיים במדינת ישראל. אנו פועלים במשך 24 שעות ואנחנו נמשיך לעשות זאת בצורה יעילה, מהירה, טובה ומלאה.
Magen David Adom, your life is our life.
To talk about Magen David Adom's efforts on that fateful day, I'd like to call up Tamar Uriel Be'eri, managing editor of jpost.com. She will interview Menachem Blumenthal and Ido Rosenblatt.
All right, well, I think there's no question that Magen David Adom, MADA for short, was central in saving hundreds, possibly thousands of lives during the October 7th massacre. Ido, I want to start with you. MADA uses some of the most advanced technology in the world when it comes to first medical care, right? What does that look like?
It's a good question to begin with. One of our Second Lebanon War was that we're looking for solutions that help us to manage situation, including missile attacks and etc. And we didn't find any this kind of solutions in the world, and we began to develop our system. We saw in October 7th these systems that have a lot of abilities, including the AI abilities to decrease the response time, to do a lot of procedures automatically that help us to work and to run this operation. But when I heard Meirav, I have a goosebump. One of the abilities that implicated in the system is the ability to have a text, to send footage, to do real-time video with the people that call to Magen David Adom. And those abilities help us a lot in the beginning of the incident, in the morning of October 7th, to understand the location. You remember the party in Romi. A lot of people ran from the party. They was in the field. It was very difficult to allocate them, to find them, and to send the ambulances or the other forces of Magen David Adom to save them. So those abilities was implemented in the system. It was developed in-house, was very help us to do our mission.
So Menachem, tell us a little bit about what MADA paramedics saw on the ground on October 7th. How did this start to play out?
So it's a long story. First of all, thank you for your great hospitality and for coming to us. For a background to my story, I live in Kibbutz Ad. Kibbutz Ad is in the Western Negev, near Kfar Aza and Nachal Oz. They are our neighbors and our friends. I have been a paramedic in Magen David Adom for nearly 20 years, and I thought that I saw almost everything and know to handle with a lot of emergency cases, but the reality showed me different. In October 7, Saturday, I was in the end of my 24-hour shift in Tzohar Station. Tzohar Station located in Eshkol Regional Council. And our station provides emergency medical services to 32 localities in Eshkol area near Gaza, near the border. Around 6:30, when the rocket barrage began, we received a call about some severely injured people in the field, so we went out. There were a lot of circumstances or events, with a lot of critical thinking based on random decision or even experience decision, but this is the reason I am still alive today. When we arrived to the scene, we saw a few patients with severe injuries, and at that moment, we heard in our communication system that few staff members were shot by the terrorist. And then I realized that we are in a different story, that the war is inside Israel, not outside Israel. So I decided to take my patient to one of the new localities, to a synagogue, and we look for any shelter to put the patient inside instead of evacuate the patient to hospital. Our work routine is scoop and run, to arrive to the scene, to evaluate the patient, and give the treatment he needs, especially saving life treatment, and evacuate him to hospital, to the definitive care unit he needs, if it's operation room or trauma unit. And instead of, we took our patient to synagogue and start to treat the patient in the synagogue. It's called stay and play in the field. And then to start to realize I am in a synagogue, I need to care my patient, my team, my EMT ambulance driver, and I have a personal gun, with 16 bullets, and start to calculate how many bullets I will shot in any terrorist that will enter to the synagogue, because all the area was full of terrorists. We heard everything outside.
It's just a completely different reality than anybody could ever imagine.
Absolutely. Around 9 a.m., I start to receive calls from my friends who is in the first responding army units in one of the new localities, and they told me they went to fight with a terrorist, and some of them were injured and even killed, and they called to help. But I couldn't do anything, because outside, a lot of terrorists anywhere. After 1 hour, we could reach them, and I evacuate them to my point in a synagogue. And you need to understand, we are talking about Saturday, it's holiday, it's called Simchat Torah. And instead of dance and pray and be happy in the synagogue, it became to operation room with a lot of patients. Some of them died.
Ido, what did this look like from the Magen David Adom headquarters?
Very complicated. We train for different scenarios. The system knows to manage different scenarios, but nobody prepared, nobody trained to hold patients like Menachem hold 40 hours to deal with critical patients for a lot of time. The system, or the understanding that the system help us to create the picture, to understand the full picture, help us to understand nearly after 7 a.m. that we have a huge problem in a lot of different scenes, different locations. But for this scenario, to keep so many patients, so many hours under guns, under fire, under rockets, it's very, very, very challenging.
Especially must be prepared for the present and to the future.
For something of this size, of this caliber. Thank you so much, Ido and Menachem, for sharing your stories. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a good conference, a good summit is one where everybody is listening closely, even after 2 hours of very intense
debates, of very intense testimonies. And because we do not want to interrupt this beautiful atmosphere that we have right now here, we are skipping the break and we are just pushing through. Yeah, I know you got it, but that's what I just thought would sound the most polite. So I will ask now Marian Hoffmann to join me here on stage again, because for our next panel on economics and innovations, some of you might have wondered, what is that all about? But let's be honest, economics, of course, has taken a major hit in Israel due to the war.
That's right. Due to the war, the economy has suffered tremendously. Partners are struggling to make international collaborations. And of course, it is costing us a lot of money. But to be able to discuss that, thank you, Tatiana, so much. To be able to discuss that, I want to bring up some real experts. Yaron Ashkenazi, founder and managing partner of Oz Ventures. Please take a seat. Dr. Dan Zaviri, co-founder and CEO of Carbon Blue. Omer Kalof, co-founder and CEO of Innovitz Technologies, and Heiko Toms, State Secretary at the Federal Ministry of Finance. Thank you. Welcome. So we have some very interesting companies here, and I want to be able to give the audience, while we're short of time, so very quick, but a chance to know who these companies are. I'm going to start with Oz Ventures, with Yaron Ashkenazi. Tell us what you do.
Thank you so much, Marian. I came to live in Canada 15 years ago. So the first thing that they told me is, you are a Sabras. You have to be very polite. You're coming to the country of politeness, and you have to be polite. So I will start with the politeness. I want to thank Jennifer, the world, and Zvika. I want to thank Marian, and I want to thank Inbal, and everyone from Jerusalem Post, first and foremost. Secondly, a little bit about ourselves. We are basically a Canadian-Israeli investment firm. Sorry. Thank you so much. We are basically a Canadian-Israeli investment firm. We are investing in the most cutting-edge, multi-stage, deep tech AI solutions. We are fighting the most, I would say, it's most sophisticated challenges of the world with our technologies. We are implementing a special active capital approach in order to do so. We have tens of companies. All of them are basically serving the defense agencies on one hand and bringing at the same time something revolutionary for the civil market. And we basically looking to advance more technologies that are going to contribute for the safety and security of our planet.
Thank you. 60 seconds. Dan Zaviri.
I will try to be shorter. So I'm from Carbon Blue, and in Carbon Blue we develop a novel technology to capture and remove carbon dioxide from the environment that can be integrated into existing industrial facilities. So that way we're trying to make the problem into the solution and help industry, instead of increasing carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, reduce it.
Amazing. Omer.
Thank you. I'm Omer Kalof. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Innovitz Technologies. When I come to Germany, I feel a little bit at home. Our customers, we are from the automotive tech. We're developing self-driving car technologies. Our customers are BMW and Volkswagen. We are about to launch with BMW in a few weeks. The car is going to be on the road for technology, and it's going to be fun.
So one of the reasons that we wanted to hold this panel is, of course, because the war has transformed or impacted Israel's innovation sector in a number of ways. I want to start with you, Yaron, if you're within your company, Oz Ventures. It's actually been very involved in the recovery efforts, including leveraging technologies that you were using before October 7th. What can you share about that?
Sure. So when the war started, we started to immediately implement technologies that are in our portfolio. For example, we have a facial recognition technology that helping, nations to secure the borders. And immediately, we implemented this technology in the hospitals in Beersheba and Ashkelon. And with this technology, we helped to identify hundreds of people that had been burned alive and couldn't be identified. This was covered also by the Forbes. And we are using another technology that is called CoSound, Coruscant on a day-by-day basis is helping banks, is helping the financial market to identify synthetic fraud by AI. And in the war, we basically succeed to build faces from voices. When the Hamas terrorists basically did some of their acts, they didn't video their faces, they just spoke. We are able to build their faces and provide it to the authorities in order to bring them to justice. We have many other technologies that have been serving us during this period of time and serve the nation. And many of them are within our portfolio, and we can't discuss it in more details. We did a lot in order to advance our technologies also to secure the Jewish nation and the Jewish federations all over the world in order to ensure that they will be able to live their lives in safe conditions.
Thank you. Now, it hasn't all been easy since October 7th. There's actually been a noticeable shift in the business landscape in Israel. I actually frequently hear from researchers and entrepreneurs that it's becoming increasingly challenging to find business partners, with some even suggesting that Israelis are facing ostracism. Heiko Toms, could you provide your take on the situation and elaborate on the sentiment in Germany regarding conducting business with Israel?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. And since I'm the only government official on this podium, let me just say once again, I'm sure you've heard it before, that Israel security, that we stand in full solidarity with Israel. This is non-negotiable for us, and you can continue to count on us, whatever may come up. I've been traveling to Israel since I was 17, almost every other year. And so I see how the country has changed, that it will never be the same again. But that doesn't mean that you have to change the good things which are happening. And one of the things that are good are actually the very strong German-Israeli business ties. So I'm very happy to report that German companies, corporations have expressed their unwavering support to Israel, that they have continued their work, that they've maintained their business activities, that investors, technology scouts, that service providers have continued their work, and that employees, if they have left, have already returned to the countries. Because one lesson from me, maybe the one lesson from where I see it, is that you have to continue our work, they have to continue to strengthen our cooperation. That's the lesson that we have to have, because we also have to look into the future. I find it very fitting, I find it very appropriate that we talk about business, that we talk about the economy, that we talk about doing things together also on a daily basis for daily life.
Thank you. Tell me, how do you envision the future then of cross-border collaborations and partnerships between Israeli companies and international counterparts in light of the ongoing conflict? Do you think that what you're describing with Germany holds true everywhere else?
Well, that I don't know about, but I can tell you that we are going to do our part. So I can only go back to what I just said. We have to build even stronger ties, have to work more closely together. And from a Ministry of Finance perspective, I'm very happy how close the cooperation with Israel is. We work very closely on a technical level with the Israeli Ministry of Finance, in particular in the area of financial innovation and also cybersecurity. And this is, I'm also the head of the German Commission on Financial Stability. This is of utmost concern for us. So we have different working groups, different formats where we work together with Israel. And this is something where we are actually learning from Israeli experience, from the Israeli expertise. And this is why we have our own interest in continuing this and to do more of the same. And let me also mention that we, of course, want to be in Germany the European hub for innovative businesses, for technology. So with the license from the German BaFin, the Financial Supervisory Authority, you can operate all over Europe. And I'm very happy that this is already happening. I've returned to Germany last April after 10 years of living abroad, and how much more Hebrew you now hear in the streets of Berlin, how many Israelis you meet at night in bars. That's absolutely amazing and a very, very positive sign. That's what we need to deepen and make stronger.
Thank you. Innovation, such as the topics that you're talking about, whether it's climate change or it's new technology, self-driving cars, it should be unrestricted. Could each of you share your perspective on the role of innovation in the business community during times of conflict? Omer, I want to start with you.
Sure. So obviously when the war started, everyone was shocked, but I think in Israel people are very resilient. I think the business was actually reacting faster than the government in the first days. by supporting the employees that were drafted and helping them when they're in the field. Obviously, when the war continues, many gaps float. You know, when there are crises, you start to learn about the problems that suddenly there's no solution for them. My WhatsApp and LinkedIn was flooded itself by soldiers that were aware about the technology that we are developing and trying to see how we can solve it. I can tell you that many groups on WhatsApp by many entrepreneurs like myself and different technology companies were working together in order to help and push things forward. I'm sure that in every company like ours had a dedicated team to work with the different, I would say, teams at the army or the security in order to find ways. I mean, innovation companies like ourselves hold a lot of talent that can bring solutions very fast, and that's what we're happy to do.
Thank you. Dan?
Well, I think in the most abstract level, conflict and innovation are two very different solutions to a common underlying problem, which is scarcity of resources. While in conflict, we are trying to obtain resources of others. In innovation, we're trying to find ways to do more with less and basically use these resources to support more people, more communities. And in a world which the population is growing and the resources are limited, innovation is the only true way to ensure that in the long term conflicts can be resolved or avoided. But in order for innovation to prevail, we need collaboration from many stakeholders, including the public. And I want to use this opportunity to thank Die Welt and Jerusalem Post to convey this message along with other organizations like the Israel Export Institute.
Thank you. Yaron, do you feel the same way?
In a way, I want to attack it also from a different angle also. So, you know, when the war started, many investors approached us and said, where is the high-tech of Israel? And, you know, we thought about it and we answered that we believe that the technologies was there. The problem was, in some way, the overconfidence that nothing like that can happen. The technology is there. We see hundreds of investors that are, in principle, are more eager to invest now in Israel in order to ensure that we will continue to be a startup nation. For them, this is the island of stability in the Middle East. We can take it even one step further. Not only that, we decided, and we are, I believe, one of the few venture capitals with more than 9 funds that decided to establish immediately during the war a philanthropic foundation. As a matter of fact, I'm saying to you that we're doing it in strategic collaboration with Jerusalem Post. And this philanthropic foundation is advancing things like treating the mental health of people that have been raped in this occasion. It's advancing, building the stability again of the south of the state of Israel by investing more than $250 million in new technologies, building deep tech technology academy there, and also, as I mentioned before, making sure that we will implement our cutting-edge technologies to advance the safety of other nations as we're doing so far. We have strategic advisors from many, many countries, security and intelligence directors from the MI5 and from the CIA and from the Israeli agencies. And we're working in a collaboration with the agencies outside Israel in the Western world to ensure that nothing like the October 7 will happen again.
Thank you.
Startups spawn from problems, and we have a big problem. And I think that in 5 years from today, you'll find the startup nation is going to flourish, because I see a lot of work now done by people that are trying to solve those problems.
It's interesting. I was speaking to someone recently who spoke about defense technology specifically in that way, that now is the time to invest in defense technology, because now, in the aftermath of the war, all of the new defense technology will start to be born. Heiko, going back to you, tell me, what do you see as the role of the business community in conflict?
Well, maybe I'm not the one to speak for businesses. I don't own a business. Sometimes I wonder why. But I speak for the government here, and our role is really to create the framework conditions for business to flourish, to create a positive business climate, and we're doing just that now. We want Israel to continue to be the startup nation. We want you to flourish as a startup nation, and we want to benefit from that and work with you and do more together. So, as I said, we need to create the right framework conditions, and then there's so much talent in Israel, in Germany, for them to fill that space, and that's what we want to achieve together, so let's do that.
Do you believe the economy has a role to play in developing peace and bringing peace about?
I think that's the basis and foundation for everything, clearly, and this is why I find this theme so appropriate for this conference.
Thank you. So I want to wrap up now. Each of you have, again, 60 seconds. You've shared your pitch. Now I want you to share how you believe the innovations and technologies that each of you are developing can contribute to fostering peace and stability in the regions like ours affected by conflict. Omer, you start.
Okay, so obviously Innovis is operating in the mobility and we're trying to save lives. More people died on the road actually than wars in the last 20 years. Actually, if you aggregate the two world wars together. So obviously, innovation is here to solve problems. I think that the businessmen like myself can help and bridge peace by connecting, I would say, synergies, motivations of different countries. I think the path to having a more, I would say, peace in the Middle East, which sounds like a fairyland, I think that they should come by contracts like the Abraham contracts. It should come from business association between companies in different countries, visits of Israeli businessmen in Saudi Arabia to make it happen. I think this is the path forward that businessmen can help to set the right motivation between the two countries.
Dan, what do you think? Especially coming off the Director General, I believe just yesterday, right? He told us that climate change is one of the causes of conflict. React.
Yes. Well, climate change will no doubt be one of the drivers of destabilization around the world in the next decades. And that in two levels. One, by changing the economy and the division of power and resources all around the world. And the second is by really hurting and damaging people, especially from disenfranchised communities that will carry the brunt of climate change. And the technologies that we develop in Carbon Blue will help to mitigate and alleviate that in both of those two levels.
Thank you. Your own final sentiments.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. So I would say that we, the State of Israel and OzVenture, we are here to ensure the safety and the stability of the civil market and the safety and stability of our nations. We are here with our technologies to ensure that each one of you and us will know what is right and what is wrong, and not vice versa. We are here to make sure that we are able to continue to develop technologies that helping societies and helping humanity to survive from COVID-19 or other viruses. And I would say that we are here in order to make sure that we are able to do it together. And I want to thank, in this opportunity, Germany for the support with the State of Israel. It's not goes without saying. We know to appreciate. We, the Jewish nation, know to appreciate. For me, this place here, Germany, is closing a circle after 20 years in the high-tech, but also 20 years in Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial Educational Center. And I'm calling you from here to join us in Israel and to join us in the high-tech sector to ensure exceptional innovations that will secure our nation and make sure that nothing like October 7 will happen again. And I want to take, last but not least, I know that we have 5 more seconds. I want to say to everyone, maybe it's clear or maybe not, but this pin here means that our heart is in Gaza until all those hostages are coming back. And I want to take this opportunity to applaud Meirav. She's not here, maybe she's speaking with the ambassador. What a mother, what a mother, what a leader, what a fighter. an example for each one of us. So the world, Jerusalem Post, once again, many thanks. Many thanks for helping us to ensure the safety of stability of the Western world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce German-Israeli pop sensation Sabina. Sabina has straddled her seemingly conflicting identities since childhood. Growing up in Germany, Sabina's identity as a German Jew was shaped by her intergenerational experiences of her father, who narrowly survived the Holocaust and yet remains as part of the Jewish community in Europe. Since then, she has merged her European roots and her Jewish identity, singing in German, English, French, and Hebrew. Sabina has found her voice and her identity in the intersection of these cultures. Please welcome Sabina, who will be interviewed by Tamar Uriel Be'eri.
Sabina, thank you so much for joining us.
It's wonderful to be here. I'm so grateful, and I feel so honored, and I'm moved to be here. I think it's such a wonderful idea to support at the real moment when Israel needs Germany. Germany is here. And thank you, Axel Springer, and thank you, Jerusalem Post. It's just really, really, really important.
So, Sabina, you belong to a particular generation of diaspora Jewry that has seen firsthand what the world's biggest catastrophe can do to a person. You, like Mayan said, tell us about how you, the daughter of a second and third generation Holocaust survivors, have seen the effect of this mass genocide personally.
I think myself growing up in Germany as a child, being Jewish, and growing up there and being in school, I wanted to be exactly like all the other children, but unfortunately, I felt like a stranger in my own land, and it was very difficult. I wanted to be just the same, wanted to grow up. I wanted to feel Christmas. I wanted to have a Christmas gift and Santa Claus coming to me. But my Jewish identity was very strong because my grandparents obviously didn't survive the Holocaust. So therefore, it was a very estranged childhood.
It was very burdened by your identity as a Jewish girl.
Yes, it was. And later on in life, I learned the necessity to understand more of the Holocaust myself and to understand the atrocity. And today, it's more important than ever, because the 7th of October showed us a new face in our own country to have kind of a Holocaust. And that's why I'm here.
So did you feel any sort of, I don't know, release or a calming of that when you made Aliyah, when you moved to Israel?
I was very happy. Like being a teenager and coming to Israel on my mom's side, like we had a lot of family, so I was really familiar with Israel and with my Israeli roots, and I loved it. But then also I came to a Jewish boarding school and a bit religious, so it was also cultural shock. And a lot of people like, you're from Germany, are you Jewish? And yes, I'm Jewish, I made Aliyah, I came here as a Zionist. So it was a split for me.
A culture shock.
Yes, definitely it was.
So you've been passionate about your music, and I mean, I'm curious if that's kind of the meeting point for you, right? Because you have this German identity, you have this Israeli identity, Is that where those two things merge? Is that where you can connect between the two?
I think music is a very important tool that basically helps people to connect and to share our personal stories and feelings. And it's so universal. It is. And no matter where you are, you feel together and you can connect.
So, I mean, music connects, but if you can connect through music, I'm curious how you would go about doing that in your specific context. Do you sing in German? And
yes, I have done some festivals where I actually sang in German. And now being here, I haven't been to Berlin about 8 years. It felt like I'm 14. I'm coming back to my roots, to my culture. And it was, I was amazed. And the same feels with music. I can now sing in German. And I would love also to cooperate or to write a song with a German singer. It would be lovely, I think, especially in this time, to create something that could make a change. We need those changes.
So you think that art is a way to have people understand one another? Like, do you think, for example, that the German people understand why it's so necessary for the state of Israel to exist?
Yes, I definitely think there are a lot of Germans. They support Israel. They understand that we are fighting for the existence of the Jewish state. We are not fighting the Palestinians. We are fighting for our existence, and which is crucial. I mean, I was shocked. I'm a mother of 2 children, and I'm listening to the stories, and it's heartbreaking. It really is. I mean, I have no words. It's so hard when you're there to understand it, because you live there on a daily basis and you feel it. It's like a heartbeat. So
it's not easy at all, but nevertheless, music is a way to connect all of us. Sabina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Dear friends, I'm pleased to welcome the organizers and participants of this significant conference. It is symbolic that this time the conference takes place in Germany, the land that has produced some of the world's greatest philosophers, writers, scientists, musicians, and scholars of Jewish origin. Jewish life on German soil has known different periods of highs and lows, from medieval isolation and persecution through flourishing times of emancipation to the terrible years of Nazism, which became a catastrophe for our people. But German society has learned essential lessons from those terrible years. Eventually, a renewed and democratic Germany became a true friend of Israel. It has always assisted the Jewish state in times of need and continues to do so today, for which we are sincerely grateful. Today, the German authorities take Jewish security very seriously and fight uncompromisingly any manifestations of antisemitism. No wonder Jewish life in Germany only keeps evolving these days. The Euro-Asian Jewish Congress maintains working relationships with revived Jewish communities and organizations in Germany, consisting to a large extent of people from the former Soviet Union. More recently, we have launched a series of publications in cooperation with one of Germany's most prestigious academic publishers, De Gruyter. Still, not everyone has learned one of the major lessons of the Second World War. Many haven't realized what fundamentalist theories and hate-filled ideologies can lead to. Only a few can fully recognize that such ideologies erode the very foundations of the society in which they thrive. Tragically, on October 7th, we once again witnessed what inhumane brutality people obsessed with their ideology are capable of. More than that, the events of the horrifying terrorist attack on the Israeli population have also raised a wave of blatant antisemitism around the world. The scale of this age-old chronic disease, hatred of Jews, which is taking on ever new forms, has once again managed to surprise us. Apparently, all the hard work we're doing, including with our partners at the World Jewish Congress under the leadership of my friend Ambassador Roland Lauder, is not enough. But we must not put our hands down. Education, proactive diplomacy, and peaceful dialogue keep us dreaming that maybe one day we will speak of antisemitism in the past tense. Interfaith dialogue is a prime example of this. It may once have seemed that religions would always be at feud, but from long centuries of religious wars and persecutions, we have come to mutual recognition and religious tolerance in a relatively short time. In this regard, I would like to emphasize that we do not see the war with Hamas as a confrontation with Islam as a whole. Hamas terrorists, like other radical Islamists, may claim to be true representative of Muslims. Still, we know that Islam, like other Abrahamic religions, is, in fact, based on the ideals of peace, cooperation, and respect to others. One doesn't need to look far for examples. Many Muslim Arabs, citizens of the State of Israel, participate in all spheres of public life and hold many senior positions. Our brothers and fellow citizens, Druze and Bedouin, fight terror alongside Jews serving the Israeli army and police. Abrahamic Accords have opened the door to unprecedented cooperation between Israel and the Gulf countries. The companies I manage are taking part in this process. Together with our partners in the United Arab Emirates, we are addressing the water scarcity and food security challenges in our region. We always believed that technology and care for human life, growth, and well-being would bring a new reality to the Middle East. One of the companies that I run, WaterGen, produces devices that make clean drinking water from moisture in the air. Before the war, several such devices were installed in the Gaza Strip, where people were suffering from a shortage of clean drinking water. WaterGen was the only company to install dozens of its devices in Gaza, in cooperation with the Israeli Defense Force and local partners. They were connected to solar panels and operated in hospitals. The reality has changed since then, but the brutal war unleashed by Hamas terrorists won't mislead us or harden our hearts. I am convinced that if society eliminates its radical ideology, opposes lies and propaganda, admits mistakes, and chooses to cherish every human life, everything can change in less than a generation. And if anyone doubts this, just look around. Germany has already made this way, and today it serves as a great example that even on the rubble of raging hatred, it's always possible to grow a truly blossoming garden. We will continue to fulfill our essential mission in the world, to be light to the nations, and together with those who believe in peaceful coexistence, we will build a more confident, sustainable, and peaceful future for us and the entire region. And it is crucial to talk about this kind of future now. Therefore, I again thank the conference organizers, welcome all its participants, and wish you all fruitful work. Thank you for your attention.
So, ladies and gentlemen, when we are trying to take a closer look at the question how to fight anti-Semitism, maybe we should listen to those whose job it is on a daily basis to do this, to fight anti-Semitism and also to enhance resilience. So we are very lucky to have two pros here tonight who will provide us with a bit of insight and I hope a lot of data what maybe some sort of solution could be. So the very first speaker now will be Raheli Baratz-Reeks, the head of Department for Combating Antisemitism and Enhancing Resilience at the World Zionist Organization. A very warm welcome to you. And right after Raheli, we will listen to Ron Brummer, the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs and Combating Antisemitism too. Raheli, the stage is yours.
Guten Abend. Vielen Dank to the Jerusalem Post und to Die Welt. First, I want to start and mention another newspaper called Die Welt. Die Welt was the first Zionist newspaper that was published by Theodor Herzl in 1897 here in Germany. This newspaper was the first to write about Zionist topic, antisemitism, that others refused. A couple of months later, Herzl established the Zionist organization in Basel. The massacre on October 7 changed all our lives, those of us who live in Israel and those of us who live abroad alike. The terror we witnessed on the 7th was not just directed at the state of Israel, but the entire Jewish population. In the aftermath of this tragedy, while the bodies are yet grow cold and the wounds are still fresh, we are confronted with an alarming reality. Antisemitism is once again taking foot, this time on the social media. Notably, anti-Israel protests did not start with the IDF ground operation, but rather the moment Hamas started butchering. In the first 14 days of the war, there were 1,200% increase in posts online that include violent anti-Semitic sentiments. These posts called for violence against Jews, Israeli, Zionist. A significant 79% of them were in Arabic. For some perspective, 2023 started with a decline in anti-Semitic events around the world. However, since October 7th, the number has gone up by the hundreds. 6 times more reports per month on anti-Semitism in the months of October to December compared to January to September. There is no geographical or political connection between Canada, Australia, Brazil, and the campuses in the United States. But in all of these places, we have seen an over of 700% increase in anti-Semitic incidents. Here in Germany, there has been 320% increase in anti-Semitic incidents, nearly 30 incidents a day that has been reported, because most of the anti-Semitic incidents around the world is not been reported at all. In France, since October 7, there were 4 times more incidents than the entire 2022. In United Kingdom, there has been a 500 increase since the start of the war, and 10 times more regarding to BDS and Israeli companies. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Recently, we have experienced an anomaly where the extremist progressive movement have teamed up with a nationalist group in their common ground, being justified anti-Semitism and hatred for Jews. Liberal, academic, university institutions are trying to present anti-Zionism as a valid form for anti-Semitism. Yes, this is anti-Semitism, a new and an improved name for the same old hate, an attempt to justify the hatred for Jews. Yes, you can critique Israel and its policy, but you cannot disregard Israeli very right to exist. Perhaps one day we will step out from the shadows of our past and emerge stronger, pushing for a future built on unity and humanity. The adoption of the IRA Convention by increasing number of countries, city, and university offer a glimmer of hope in the fight against anti-Semitism. From Berlin, a city which our history is deeply connected, we can draw inspiration. It teaches us that after darkness comes the light, and that friendship and solidarity can flourish against all odds. As we stand together in this historic city, let us declare our commitment to combating anti-Semitism in all its forms. Let us believe in the capacity to grow and the power to right wrongs. Let us bring upon ourselves a future full of opportunities to growth and understanding. But we must remember, there is a new form of anti-Semitism growing, a kind much less acknowledged, the silence. We cannot let this silence prevail. We must loudly and proudly proclaim, There is no place for anti-Semitism today. Thank you very much.
Good evening, dear hosts from Jerusalem Post and Die Welt, dear colleagues and friends. It's been 130 days since the atrocities of October 7th that brought with it an unimaginable increase in anti-Semitism worldwide. The worst massacre against Jews since the Holocaust brought a wave of anti-Semitism that none of us could have imagined could actually take place in modern times. This joint report that the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs conducted with our amazing partners from the World Zionist Organization and the Jewish Agency reveals the challenging reality we are facing, as Racheli just mentioned, numbers that are unimaginable, as I said. A sharp increase of 1,200% in the amount of posts that contained violent anti-Semitic content that called for violence against Jews and Israelis. Now, global anti-Semitism continues to rely on ignorance, trends, and disinformation. Social platforms, and it has been discussed here before, continue to enable the dissemination and assimilation of anti-Semitic concepts, which influence public opinion and shape both it and global consciousness. Now, did you know research has found that at least 30 minutes of surfing the internet per day on some of these platforms increases the chance of the viewer to entertain anti-Semitic attitudes. On the same level, sympathy for Israel unfortunately continues its decline, especially in Western countries, where youngsters and elements identified with the progressive left seek to undermine the legitimacy of the State of Israel, especially using anti-Semitic propaganda. And the Iron Swords War has intensified these processes. Minister Gideon Saar mentioned it earlier, and it's important. The Palestinian Authority continues to serve as a global focal point for disseminating and promoting calls for the destruction of the State of Israel and the murder of Jews. And within this context, the Palestinian education system continues to be the main factor for assimilating anti-Semitic narratives as part of the Palestinian national identity. On the same hand, civil society organizations such as the BDS campaign continue to promote boycotts of the State of Israel in various domains and continue to strive to deny the right of the State of Israel to exist as the state of the Jewish people. Additionally, non-governmental organizations which ostensibly seek to promote human rights, and some of which are supported generously by European governments, continue to stand out in the promotion of anti-Semitism and the dehumanization of Jews, both directly and indirectly. Nonetheless, several significant achievements were accomplished in the battle against anti-Semitism this year. At the top of the list, many countries, organizations, and international institutions passed draft legislation and laws to fight anti-Semitism, many of them following the events of October 7th. I think Germany stands in the top of this list, and I salute the German government for that. Obviously, including the adoption of the IHRA definition, which continues to serve as the most essential, accepted, and effective internationally used tool to identify and brand anti-Semitic expressions. So, what can and what should be done by all of us who deal with these issues? The operative concept of actions taken regarding the battle against anti-Semitism should shift from the defensive to the offensive vis-à-vis the perpetrators and the centers of dissemination of anti-Semitism, as I said, especially Palestinian leadership, which has been waging a war of attrition against the State of Israel on the legal front, BDS organizations and other entities whose purported aim is to promote human rights, so-called. Regulation and oversight of social media platforms should be especially promoted, as should be their policies regarding anti-Semitic discourse and practices, including bolstering content review teams. IHRA definition, obviously, countries, non-federal government entities, academic institutions must be encouraged to adopt the IHRA definition, implement it, and work in order to make it more and more effective. Now, this is not an Israeli problem, it is not a German problem, it's a human problem. So that is why I call it is time now to act and fight back against the oldest hate in history, Israelis, Germans, human beings. Thank you very much.
Ron, Raheli, thank you so much for the data you gave us, for the insight you gave us. I think this is a good preparation for Jennifer Wilton, who will take over now the stage, and for the panel on anti-Semitism. Jennifer, please.
Okay, and I'm very happy to have a big group of panelists. You can come on stage now, Rabbi Pinchas Goldschmidt, who's the president of the Conference of European Rabbis. And let me add this, he will also be awarded with the prestigious Karlspreis of Aachen this year. He's coming. I just go on because we are so short in time. And then we have Felix Klein, who has a long title. He's the first person to hold the office of Federal Government Commissioner for Jewish Life in Germany and the fight against anti-Semitism. And Michal Kotler-Wunsch, who basically does the same for Israel, but has not such a long title.
That's right. Yeah.
And he's the special envoy for combating anti-Semitism for Israel. And finally, Michael Wolfson, who is an historian. He's an expert in German Jewish history and Israeli history, and author of a lot of standard works and texts, and I guess I'm sitting here.
Did you want to sit in the middle?
No, it's fine. Okay, so thanks a lot. I'm very happy to have such a brilliant group of experts here. I think we just heard something we often hear, and that's that anti-Semitism has no place somewhere, but the reality is it has a lot of place and space. We saw that during the last few months. Only in Germany in the last few days, Felix Klein knows quite well. We saw a Jewish student that has been physically attacked and remained hospitalized till, I think, the day before yesterday. We had an Israeli judge who was verbally assaulted in a lecture hall and forced to leave. We had a lecture by the director of the Jewish Museum Frankfurt that was disrupted by aggressive pro-Palestinian groups. And I think this anti-Semitism of university campuses is particularly perplexing for many of us in Germany, not so in the US, but in Germany. The focus here was primarily for a long time on right-wing extremism, which of course still remains a concern. And recently also on growing anti-Semitism among certain migrant populations. So, some of the questions I think we should talk about is, did the October 7th remove masks, as you put it a few weeks ago on a speech? How important is it to differentiate between these various types of anti-Semitism? And also, how crucial is this distinction in our current effort to combat this? Let me start with Rabbi Pinchas Goldschmidt. Only yesterday you posted a comment on yet another anti-Semitic incident that occurred near Davos. Jews were banned from renting ski equipment. Okay, this is happening 2024. It gets really weird. Anyway, in response, you wrote, I once saw a major collection of postcards featuring anti-Semitic caricatures from the last century. So is history actually repeating itself? Or does it only go on and on and on?
I didn't finish the sentence, and the sentence that most, like 80% of the postcards were from resort towns, like Marienbad and others, because that's the place where the Jewish population came in contact with the general population. And this also caused much anti-Semitism. So I want to speak, I'm asking myself, what caused this explosion in anti-Semitism? Was it the massacre of Hamas, or was it the counteroffensive of Israel afterwards against Gaza? I came to the realization that what happened the 7th of October was basically we returned 120 years back to Kishinev, to the Kishinev pogrom. There was no state, there was no army, there was no intelligence. All those organizations failed, and Jews were massacred. And Jews, again, looked weak, vulnerable. And this caused anti-Semites, who were closet anti-Semites, to come out of the closet and say, yes, we are proud and we are anti-Semites and we're going to show it. And the way to fight it is to bring the strength back, which slowly it's coming back, but not only to Israel, but also to the diaspora Jewish communities. And also regarding what's happening in Davos, the way that the governments are standing, and I would salute again, especially the German government, how the governments of Europe have stood with their Jewish communities has been remarkable. And this is the best way to fight this recurrence and explosion of anti-Semitism in Europe today.
Well, actually, in the 20th century, I think there were other ways people were thinking of to stop anti-Semitism, to stop history repeating. And one of these ideas was to create international institutions. And Michal, you had a very emotional speech at the United Nations. I already quoted a part of this speech. And you said these institutions, along with their mechanism and values, have been co-opted and weaponized to facilitate the demonization, delegitimization, and application of double standards towards the state of Israel. So, was it an illusion to believe that international institutions could prevent anything?
So, that's up to us. I think that what 10/7 fueled by anti-Semitism, only seconded by the anti-Semitism that fueled the responses to 10/7 that were silent, that are silent, that deny, that justify, that support, and that attack Jews around the world in the wake of the atrocities, the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, by a genocidal terror organization openly declaring its intent to commit 10/7 or a million 10/7s again and again. I think that the reason that that was important with regards to the international institutions is the many masks that were removed on 10/7 and in the responses to 10/7 show us the intersection between, I would call them, the multiple fronts of the unconventional war that has enabled actually this mutation or this strain of an ever-mutating virus, if you will, that is of anti-Zionism or the negation of Israel's very right to exist. When I spoke about the international institutions, the international rules-based order, and understanding that after a sequence of conventional wars after 1948 and the return of Jews, a prototypical indigenous people to the state of Israel, because Israel does not exist because the Holocaust happened. In fact, the Holocaust could not have happened had Israel existed. So when we flip that understanding, thank you, when we flip that important understanding, we understand 1948 as a focal point that enabled this decades of conventional wars that failed to destroy the state of Israel, to remove it or efface it from the face of the map, erase it from the face of the map. And in fact, 1975, Zionism is Racism, UN resolution, alive and well on every single university campus in 2024, Soviet propaganda, 1975, Zionism is Racism resolution, alive and well in the name of progress on every single campus across the world and on the streets and online, is this moment of awakening that we have to understand this did not happen overnight. And the reason that I actually am so grateful to you, to Vel, to Jerusalem Post, to this audience and to this specific location talking about joint perspectives, it is because in many ways it is only Israel and Germany, perhaps of all countries in the world, that 75 years after the return of a prototypical indigenous people in a 75-year young country can come to the realization that those multiple war fronts, the international institutions, the university campus spaces, the social media spaces that we've talked about, required a process. The process is what Natan Sharansky called the 3Ds, the demonization, the delegitimization, the double standards that you mentioned, and that's why they're so critical. It's what makes the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance singularly the only benchmark that can identify this strain of anti-Semitism, and what enables, I think, our two countries to take full responsibility for understanding the process, if you will, that enables the Holocaust, or that enabled, by the way, other genocides, right? In Rwanda, in Bosnia, the demonization, the delegitimization, the double standards, and that is what we have seen in the wake of 10/7, with posters of Kfir Bibas being ripped off in streets, including right here in Berlin, and the attacks of Jews, including actually the grandson of an Olympian that was murdered in the Munich Olympics. That's the student that was attacked the other day. This is a critical moment, and I sit here with that sense of urgency that you probably hear in my voice, because I think it is an existential moment, not just for the state of Israel that is under attack as we speak. There is a war raging from multiple fronts, the Houthis and the Hezbollah and the Hamas, all proxies of a murderous Islamic regime in Iran. That is definitely an existential moment. It's an existential moment for the Jewish people that we have not faced since the return of our return to that ancestral homeland. And I very much believe that it's actually an existential moment for that infrastructure that has been co-opted and weaponized, because that is how anti-Semitism has mutated for thousands of years, by latching onto the guiding social construct of the time, religion, science, and I would say the secular religion of our time, human rights, or the international rules-based order. So it is up to us. And we have to make a decision. We have seen the ICJ being weaponized. We have seen UNRWA being weaponized. We've spoken about many of that. It's in our hands to either reclaim that international rules-based order, apply it equally and consistently, or accept that it has failed.
Thank you so much. I have a question for Felix Klein, because you mentioned it, a lot of speakers mentioned it today, the good relations between Israel and Germany, which are of course true. And also when we talk about anti-Semitism on an international level, often we meet people who say, yeah, but in Germany, at least there is an awareness, things are better there. But I see there is kind of a gap between people who are not in Germany and see what's happening here, think how the situation is in Germany, because actually anti-Semitism is quite a big problem.
Yes, it is. I mean, we have heard the figures. They are dramatic. There's an incredible rise, totally unacceptable, of anti-Semitic crimes and incidents in this country. And the fight against anti-Semitism in Germany is, of course, always special because of our history. And yet we can be quite pleased that the structures we have introduced in the past years in the fight against anti-Semitism now start really to work. I mean, we have set up a joint federal and state commission where we systematically want to face anti-Semitism in its prevention. We have adopted a national strategy. We see that the channels have been really developed in order to face anti-Semitism. I agree very much with Rabbi Goldschmidt saying we have to empower the Jewish communities, and also to structure the way the Jewish communities deal with police and security forces. And I'm very glad that according to a survey carried out by the Central Council of Jews in Germany, 96% of the communities have expressed their satisfaction with the way the police and the judiciary deals with anti-Semitism. We see that, for instance, the new laws we have introduced in the past years now take ground. So, for instance, burning foreign flags is a crime now. It was one of my suggestions, and this helps the authorities now whenever there's a demonstration in Germany where the probability that an Israel flag is going to be burned, it is now, because of that regulation, much easier for the authority to ban demonstration with an anti-Semitic surrounding. So we have other structures, and this is, I think, the way we have to deal with anti-Semitism. We have, of course, to react to the incidents directly, to this terrible attack on the student of Freie Universität and others. That's one thing, and we have to leave it to the police and judiciary. There has to be a strong and very clear response to that. But we also have to react systematically as a society against anti-Semitism with setting up structures. So one of my pleas after this incident with this university student was that every university in Germany has to introduce a structure, a focal point, or an anti-Semitism commissioner where Jewish people or those who are attacked can report to, can go to, that there's a systematic reaction to it. And we are on a good path, and I'm very happy that our government and our president and in parliament, by and large, people have understood that we get support. And at the same time, we have to, of course, to establish also international structures in the fight against anti-Semitism. Of course, it's obvious that that anti-Semites cooperate also international level, and there we have to develop more instruments. We have to get better. I mean, in the European Union, we have developed now the Digital Services Act, which is a very good instrument, but on UN level, unfortunately, reactions are very poor. And that the UN, as we have heard, is sometimes rather the problem than the solution.
Yeah.
And yet, I think with Israel and like-minded countries like US, Canada, and others, we will continue to develop this systematic approach.
But we are talking now in how to tackle anti-Semitism, how to combat it. We are talking the whole time about what already happens. And did we already give up hope on prevention, for example? And I would like to ask you, apart from international institutions and all you were talking about, there was a source of hope that's called education. I mean, it's quite hard to believe looking at what happened in the last few weeks, but anyway, we had this hope, except Michael Wolfson, you wrote in a recent essay that the belief that education can prevent anti-Semitism was a fairy tale from beginning on. Could you explain a little bit what you meant by this?
Well, I think we have sweetened the situation too much. Yeah. Much has been done, also in Germany, but in spite of that, despite all the efforts on the micro-political level, on the macro-political level, the situation for Jews in Germany and in the diaspora countries in the Western world has worsened. And so, in fact, the most discouraging development is the fact that the better educated, even the more anti-Semitic. And make no illusion about that. And this is no surprise at all. It has not begun right now, not since 10/7, but it has begun in the mid-1960s, and it is part of a general historical process in which decolonization, which on the one hand is of course a positive development, has led to the wrong perspective with regard to Israel. That Israel was, quote unquote, a colonial enterprise. And this is now a new wording, but the very discussion and all these prejudices against Israel and Jews began always, not only in the 1960s, but even earlier. So it's an old and new story as well. And the most devastating fact is that the more we have invested in education, in enlightenment, our hope, our liberal allies have given up. They don't support us. This audience today, divided, is an oasis. And this is not Germany. The German government does much, but is unable to steer German society away from its anti-Israel and also anti-Semitic approach. And therefore, anti-Jewish and anti-Israel violence is by no means a surprise. And you hailed Mr. Klein, of course, for very good reasons, political efforts, also the judiciary. But looking at the judiciary as a whole, people are, and the perpetrators are encouraged by German judiciary. And this is the dismal situation, and the most depressing fact in a historical perspective, and I'm an historian, is that even the most educated members of society, not only in Germany, but also at the most prestigious American elite schools, which used to be, quote unquote, the fortress of the American Jewish establishment. I don't have to tell you what's going on there. What's the problem there? It's anti-Jewish attitudes. Anti-Israelism has become the entry ticket to the quote-unquote good society. We are the minority. We don't belong to this good society. And this is nothing new. And if you take Jewish history, it's the quote-unquote good old riches. But it's not good. It has never been good. It has always been very bad. And in the long run, it led to liquidation of Jews. And this is the situation. You ask me what we can do? I don't know. The older I get, the more I read, the more I do research on that, I simply don't know. And also international organizations, it's not worth a paper. All of you, participants of many, many efforts, you get a prize. Do you think that the Karlspreis will change the situation in Germany? No, it will not. People will thank you and will say, okay, now we've done our task. It's fine that we gave the prize to another Jew, a rabbi with a beard, wonderful. Here we are. We have nothing to do with anti-Semitism.
Okay.
We are fine.
I believe everything you say. Everybody does. I think every point you said is right, and we all know. But still, as we are also heading towards the end of the conference, I can't leave this like that. So if any of you or everybody has like one or two sentences about what gives them hope in combating anti-Semitism, I would be so thankful. It's a question for all of you.
So I'm happy to start. Look, 2024 is not 1944. Let's be very clear about that. We have a country, and we have sovereignty, and we have an army, and we are doing precisely what our end of never again meant. Never again are we going to wait for people to come and defend us, because they won't. But 2024 not being 1944 also means that we can turn to the countries around the world, our friends and our better friends, and say, there is a moment in which the lack of acceptance of Israel as an equal member state in the family of nations, because that's what anti-Semitism was when it targeted the individual. It barred the individual from an equal place in society. And what we see as the morphing and the mutation bars the Jewish nation state from an equal place in the family of nations. And in 2024, the state of Israel, that does exist, and the friends that we do have around the world, that means that including in our conversations even today, the lens of anti-Semitism is the one that has to assess if a reformed Palestinian Authority is reformed or not. Anti-Semitic is not moderate. I'm sorry. So the PA president, Abu Mazen, who denies the Holocaust, just as he denies 10/7 and blames Jews for the perpetration of the Holocaust, just as he blames Jews for the perpetration of 10/7, that is not moderate. A Palestinian Authority that pays to slay Jews and indoctrinates with anti-Semitic hate taught by UNRWA, which, and I have to say this in the context of this conversation, was born in sin. UNRWA perpetuated this sense of the return to where? From the river to the sea, from the north to the south. UNRWA is the problem. It can't be the solution.
Michael, you started positive. And this
No,
is not
no,
the turn we
no,
wanted.
What I want to say is holding our governments to task and holding our governments to account. And look, we are members of a coalition of special envoys from around the world that advise our governments precisely because of this. We can't always say everything as forcefully as we'd like to. But there is a point where we have to just, as I said, a lot of masks were ripped off and put it on the table. If Israel is the Jew among the nations, and there are consistent double standards applied to the Jew among the nations, then that is the source of the mutated mainstream strain of anti-Semitism we're seeing probably on the streets as we speak, with the signs saying anti-Zionism or anti-Israel. We have to fight that. And we have the tools and we have the resources. And one more thing about hope, because you said hope. The late Rabbi Sachs differentiated between optimism and hope, saying that optimism is the belief that everything will be okay, whereas hope is the belief that together we can make it okay. In that sense, optimism is a very passive virtue, whereas hope is a very active one. And it takes not very much courage to be an optimist and a great deal of courage to have hope. And what kept our people, our great-grandparents alive was hope. And what keeps me committed to our great-grandchildren is that hope. So we have no choice but to hold on to that hope and keep fighting.
I mean, she mentioned the rabbi. I think it's kind of, you have the last words.
Yes, I would like to add that difficult to add, but there's one type of anti-Semitism which has been very worrying, is the use of the Holocaust against Jews. It's also the claim of South Africa in the ICC.
Most Orwellian.
It's what the Russian government is doing by attacking Ukraine. And it is turning our sad history against us. And we have to fight it. And as Ms. Kotler once said that this is the only thing which is going to give us hope, and we're going to win. That's the good news.
Thank you so much. I think we are urged to close now because we are already over time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just give them the time to slowly, although we are over time. It's all good, we're fine. After everything that we have heard here, I would like to gather some reaction and also maybe to look a bit deeper into what daily life for Jews in Europe looks like after the 7th of October, because we've heard a lot about, like, you know, the theory, the data, the historic, the background, everything, but what has changed? So I would like to ask the three following fine gentlemen to join me here on stage. Aaron Sagui, the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Israeli Embassy, please. Dr. Josef Schuster, the President of the Central Council of the Jews in Germany, and Amir Gross-Kabiri, the President of the Jewish community of Mostar, which is the second most beautiful town in Bosnia-Herzegovina. This is where the mic is. So, Mr. Kabiri, let me start by asking you maybe just a brief background on Bosnia-Herzegovina, which has the majority of the population there is Muslim. Then you have the Serb Orthodox, you have the Catholics, and you have a very, very small Jewish community which is very loyal to the state of Bosnia-Herzegovina, has always been, even through this terrible war in the 90s. I know this because I am Bosnian. So you, as the president of the Jewish community of Mostar, what have you experienced in your daily life after the 7th of October, living amongst the majority of Muslims?
I've been witnessing a very worrying selection process between the Jews and between the Jews who are Zionists and Israelis. And this has not been done just by the public. It's been done by public leaders, by politicians, and out loud. And I was quite vocal in my opposing this kind of narrative because it's very dangerous. I own a very big factory of aluminium in Mostar. I am responsible for a very big part of the economy of the country. I have all the rights as a Jew, Zionist and Israeli, to say my opinion. And while I was very vocal, the reaction from the other side by politicians and by the public was, who are you to speak? You are just a Jew. And this kind of behavior made me to be even much more vocal and much more assertive with my opinions, and it might create me much more hate in return. And we saw much threats to my life, to my employees, which are partly Israelis, but we did not went back, opposite. I went to the battle with the politicians, with the institutions, because this is the only way for the Jewish people to say what's on their mind. To battle antisemitism, it's exactly what it is, to battle. And it's to speak out loud what we think, because Jews has no fear anymore. And we have to show it no matter where it is, even if it's a country with a Muslim majority.
Dr. Schuster, here in Germany, the Jewish communities, and maybe you are willing to share and give us a little bit of an insight of your daily life, of your routines. Have they changed ever since 7th of October? And if so, how?
Yes and no. Why? Yes and no. It's not possible to say in Germany the way is this, or the situation is so and so. We must see that the difference between the very big cities, for example, Berlin, for example, some cities in like Essen, like Cologne, like Düsseldorf, and you see on the other side parts of Germany, like my own community, which is in the northern part of Bavaria, in Würzburg, with a city with 130,000 inhabitants. It's a difference. In the big cities, we really saw and see since October the 7th growing up antisemitism, especially from the Muslim side, Arabic Muslim and also Turkish Muslims. We have 105 Jewish communities in Germany, and I think in most of these, the smaller communities, we don't see it in this way, and there is a Jewish life more or less the same than before October the 7th. Is another situation here in Berlin, where you have parts of Berlin where I would not like to go with a kippah, but this situation, not to go with a kippah, was also years ago. I remember 2015, I was new president, and we had a congress here in Berlin, and it was by a radio station, and it was a sensation that I told them not to go in some parts of Berlin with a kippah. Nothing new, but it became more since October the 7th, that's right, and it's a problem. And we can't accept it. That should not be possible for Jewish people in Germany, wherever in Germany, not to show that he is a Jew. This is not allowed, but it's not the way that you can show that you are a Jew everywhere in Germany.
Mrs. Segui, I'm very aware that you're a diplomat, but I still hope for a non-diplomatic answer here. If, let's say, one of you...
It's a reality. It's a reality.
I know, but Mrs. Segui, if one of your family members, young family members, let's say a niece, a nephew, living now in Israel, would ask you, Uncle Aaron, I would love to go for a year to Berlin, because we have a lot of young Israelis here, and in Munich too, and in Hamburg too. What would you tell him? Do it or not?
Sure, but make sure that you're coming back to Israel. I don't see a reason why not. I mean, relations between our countries are in our best ever, politically speaking. I even think that, and I agree with Mr. Schuster, I mean, there were anti-Semitic phenomena also before October 7th, and the notion of being careful where you're walking, what exactly you're wearing, have been there before as well. And the shaken or the insecurity that many, I would say, first of all, German Jews feel when I talk with them and engage with them, some friends of mine here, and some of them telling me that they are thinking about their future here in their country, in Germany. And I, as a diplomat who is exposed to the great work that people like Felix Klein is doing, so many other politicians, some of them in the room, in the Bundestag, in the ministries, both executive and legislative branches here in Germany, I think they're doing way better job, sorry to say. You wanted a non-diplomatic answer. I think they're doing much better job than they used to do. If in the past it was a lot of statements and words, I think we are seeing, especially after October 7th, also actions are following it. So putting this aside, I would say to any Israeli who would like to come to Berlin, yes, of course. And we are not escaping and we are not going into refuge because of what have happened. We have to be careful here and there, yes. But we also stand proud. I mean, it's people like Volker Beck in the public, you see how they're fighting? I mean, they give us energy. So we should go wherever we can go, not be naive, watch around, but be present and not hide. And come to Berlin, yes, why not?
Thank you so much. So to wrap this up, one question for the three of you. We've heard a lot of input, a lot of food for thoughts, I think we had here today. What is like the main thing that you will take back home? Was there one sentence, one phrase that you heard here that you are still thinking about? Was there one idea that was given where you say, haven't heard that before?
I think it's the same, to keep vocal and to keep fighting anti-Semitism by having more successful entrepreneurs, Jewish entrepreneurs, institutions, and just to keep going.
Mr. Sagui, whoever wants.
I would take maybe what the member of the Knesset, Michal Kotler-Wunsch, said about after hearing the impressive words of Mr. Wolfson, and still saying, don't forget, our people have always kept the hope alive, and we have no choice. We will, even after October 7th, and definitely be after so many events in the past, in the history of our people, we not only have no choice, it's actually we are doing it as part of our DNA. We keep pushing forward, we stand proud, we embrace our friends, we slap on the face of our enemies, and we will keep hope alive always. We have no choice.
I think we have to stand together, whether or no difference, whether diaspora or Israel. It shows the last months show us that there is really not a big difference between to be a Jew in the diaspora and to be a Jew in Israel. We have to stand together. But one point more, which I think I have to say, for Michael Wolfson, and we are friends, he told us the problems with the education. I think we should not forget that education don't start at the university. When I say an education is necessary, it means an education with small children. No child is born as an anti-Semitic. And so we have to start with education early. That's what I mean with education.
Gentlemen, thank you so much.
For our closing impulse, I'd like to introduce Professor Michel Friedman, a German-French journalist, talk show host, lawyer, philosopher, and former politician. Professor Friedman has led many of the local Jewish organizations or helped lead them, including serving as a board member of the Jewish community in Frankfurt, working for the Central Council of Jews in Germany, and serving as president of the European Jewish Congress. He has been a strong voice against anti-Semitism and racism. Welcome, Professor Friedman.
My first remark is, we are certainly a lot, but not helpless. My second remark is, this is perhaps one of the reasons that anti-Semitism is increasing again. Nothing new. There was not one day after 45, after the Shoah, that anti-Semitism was not existing. It's a naivety, not only in Germany, but in the whole world, to think that the rumor about the Jews, this is the definition of one of the biggest philosophers, Theodor Adorno, ever stopped. How could it? One of the oldest rumors due to the Christian story that the Jews killed Jesus. But we are not helpless. We are not any more helpless. 1945 was not only the beginning of a recreation of an Israeli state, but I believe it was also the recreation of the next generations, whatever happens. And yes, in a part of our societies, anti-Semitism and racism is a structural reality. Perhaps also in Israel, not anti-Semitism, but other racism. That we fight for the majority in our countries, not to close their eyes, not to close their ears, but to react on that, not for the Jews, but for themselves. Because what is anti-Semitism? It is hate against human beings. It's not enough to say I'm a Jew. I'm a human being. I'm a person. And the promise of human rights is that every person in our world has the right to have rights, have the rights to be respected. And perhaps it starts tonight here again with a discussion about Jews, human people. But if we don't react, whoever is attacked in his humanity, and now we're speaking about Jews, human being, if we don't live with the spirit that we have to help each other wherever people are attacked, then finally we will lose our civilization, our democracy, and the human rights again, which is historical, not a very intelligent remark. And that's why, let me make my next remark. We're talking about terrorists. I'm talking about criminals. I'm talking about murders. I'm talking about fighters without uniform. Sent by whom? Are we really talking about the Hamas? Are we really talking about Hezbollah? Who are they? Who would they have been without Iran? And with all my due respect, as I'm not a diplomat, we had the opportunity to listen to a representative of a state who on one hand is the problem and not the solution, plays the solution because we need him, we play with him. And this is the representative of Qatar or Saudi Arabia or whatever. Who is paying the terrorist criminals? Who is behind them? These are the crucial questions. And not only Germany, but also Germany, who didn't invent anti-Semitism, but Germany invented Auschwitz. But in other countries, I'm born in France, it was a tradition. It's a tradition in Europe. But when the Federal Republic of Germany was created, and everybody in this country promised, we learned, and everybody promised When Jews came back here, or came for the first time, we learned, never again. The promise is broken. Again is every day. And after the 7th of October, the again is more visible, but it didn't start. And then it was promised, we understood. It's not the final point of violence, Auschwitz alone. The problem were the steps towards Auschwitz. And it was promised that every first step would be reacted with the full power of the states, not only in Germany. Promise broken. And we are here all together because the promises were not only broken by the first generation, who was a Nazi generation and then went to be a Democrat generation, perhaps some of them, not all of them. We are here together because we are now responsible for our times. We are 40, 50, 60. We are the responsible elite in our times. Also, we promised. Did we realize our promises? Am I staying here as a Jew because the society realized the problems or didn't? Is it really my duty as a Jew to fight against hate? No, it's not my problem. I am perhaps a victim, but I'm not hating the Jews and I'm not hating Palestinians. I'm not hating. Because hate is the problem of all we talk about. And yes, my friend Yossi Schuster is right. Hate is something that a child is getting in his education. No child, nowhere in the world, a child is hating a group. The parents are telling him and construct the word in which children are educated. But is our educational system prepared on that? Wherever we are in a civilization democracy? And this is my last remark, or not my last, but my next. Are we talking about antisemitism or are we talking about democracy? Is the fight against Jews in the 21st century a fight against Jews only, or is it a global fight against democracy? President Xi, President Putin, and I add the Iran regime, and not only the Iran regime. And you can view it at the television, said, the 21st century will be the century of totalitarian states, and the liberal democratic states will fail. It's not a coincidence that Israel is a democratic state. And when you are feminist, where are you more protected? In Tehran or in Tel Aviv? And if you are a leftist, where are you more protected? In Tel Aviv or in Cairo? And when you want to be a journalist and express your opinion, where are you more protected? In Qatar or in Tel Aviv? And when you want to be an actor, somebody in art, where are you more free? In Tel Aviv or in Saudi Arabia? If you want to criticize your parliament, your government, and that's where I am proud about the Israelis. 250,000 Israelis every week before the war. This means in Germany 2,500,000 Germans every week. Where were they every week until today? 10,000 in Saxonia and the other countries of our country. And as long 250,000 and 2.5 million are protesters, I don't care if I like the government with the government of today or not. So why is Israel so attacked now? Because Israel is the only one and the last one in the Middle East who is representing the values of freedom, of democracy, with all the mistakes which are going on then. Take our mistakes also enough. So it's really the war about totalitarian regimes. And yes, it's a global flight. And yes, it has to do with post-colonialism, it has to do with BDS, it has to do with the Emancipation Act of Black people. Yes, and I admit that there has to be place for that. What I don't admit is that this has to be instead fighting anti-Semitism or even increasing anti-Semitism to bring the own issue to the top topic. It doesn't need that. It doesn't need that. And here again, we are talking about hate. A democracy is not hating. A democracy is respecting the own population. Dictatorships are hating their own citizens. That's why talking also about this in the area of social media. And here we're coming back to education. In the next 20 years, social media will change the world again. And social medias like TikTok are the basic for the propaganda that we never had before in humanity. Are we prepared? We are not. Time, ladies and gentlemen, is really running out. And we are talking today about Jews. We are talking today about Israel. But it is more. We have elections in America, and President Trump gave us the advices that he will not protect Europe and Ukraine anymore. A lot of lies, and the wish to have a good life in the last 20, 30 years made us vulnerable for the realities in this world. Yes, war is an element of politics. And yes, it is an element that a strong country has to be capable to defend itself, because this is the only option not to be attacked every time. But when a country is attacked, independently which one, in this case Israel, then I don't like really to hear and to listen to the Eitzes, as we are saying Yiddish, the good advices of people who are sitting wherever they are sitting, if a country wants to defend itself. And Israel has the same right to defend itself like every other country has. We can discuss about the how. But let's take in consideration that also these military acts done by terrorism murderers and not officially by the countries who are attacking us will continue in the next years and years. And now, me, I'm a Jew. But I'm not only a Jew. Firstly, I'm a human being. I'm a man, I am a lawyer, I'm a philosopher, I'm a dad. I'm a person living his life, trying to have, even though I am a Jew, some nice moments. I don't want to be reduced as a Jew. But if you reduce me being a Jew, then you can be sure that I have a response. I am not helpless. Nobody of us is helpless. Nobody of us is helpless. And to recognize that we have allies, and to talk with them, and to find strategies with them. Because the alliance is not to protect me as a Jew. I don't want nobody to protect me as a Jew. The alliance is the alliance for the human rights and for democracy. This united us here. This is the difference between Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Moscow, Peking. We believe in human rights. And that means also for me as a Jew, the human rights are existing. So if we can agree that this was today a reunion to give strong support to a democratic country where still the courts are working. And during the war, the High Supreme Court decided against the government. Take this in consideration. During a war, this happened. If we are here because we want to support a democratic country not to be destroyed by hate, and if we agree that we sit here together, regardless if we are Jews, Christian, no believing, black, white, I don't care. And we have a problem in this country like in other European countries, because right-wing parties want to destroy democracy. And we are here to protect democracy. Then me as a Jew is capable to live in this country. If this is not done, and Germany or other countries will not be democracies, not only me as a Jew will not be capable to live here anymore. I think it's a beautiful duty, and that's why I want to only add one point. Every politician today, also today, who against quoted, we must start. I want to remind him he had to start, and his predecessors 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. They didn't do enough. We will start today. We are not helpless for democracy and the freedom of humanity in Israel and in the world. Thank you very much.
Amazing.
Not much left to say after this closing speech of Michel Friedman, apart from thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Mayan, for helping me up here. Thank you for the collaboration. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, all of you who have organized this. It was fantastic, and I think this is a good moment to maybe add just one more little thing.
Yeah, I think we will end with a prayer. I want to be able to call up Rabbi Teichel, the rabbi of Germany, who will lead us in the recitation of Psalm 121. Thank you, Rabbi.
We conclude with a note of confidence that God that has helped us so long will continue to help us by singing Kapitel 121 of Tehillim, an expression of joy, confidence for the past and for the future, for the freedom of the hostages, and for the strengthening of our brothers and sisters in Israel and the world. Shir la ma'alot, esa einai el haharim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, oseh shamayim va'aretz. Al yiten lamot raglecha, al yanum shomrecha. Hinei lo yanum, ve'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha, ayad yiminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, ve'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmar tzedcha uve'echa, me'ata va'ad olam. Let's jointly sing. Ohoseh shalom bimromav. Oh, yaseh shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'imru, amen. Hey, yaseh shalom. Sorry. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu. Shkoyach, shkoyach. Super.
We will not interrupt singing people.
Okay.
We did not want to interrupt.
We're not singing.
We just want to finish.
We can sing.
No, you don't want me to sing.
Okay, so Jennifer, I have a small token on behalf of the Jerusalem Post. As you said, we have a lot of conferences. I'm never as involved as I was in this conference.
No.
So sorry for all the, last-minute changes and spontaneous requests. This is on behalf of the Jerusalem
Thank you
Post
so
group
much.
to put in your office.
Thank you so much.
For everything. Here, the camera.
I actually got on stage to say thank you, not to have a thank you from you. I really want to make it short because everybody is hungry and there's dinner. I am. There's dinner in the other room and there are also drinks. So I just want to say a huge thanks to the team that organized this conference. As I said at the beginning, 6 weeks or 7, I don't know, but there were a lot of people working in the background. I don't see them, but a lot of them are there. They did a fantastic job, I think, and they worked more than they should have.
Definitely on our behalf, Mayan, thank you for organizing this and night and day.
Mayan,
so
thank you
so much.
Thank you, Tatjana, for her superb moderation, and thank you to all the speakers. And now we can just go
L'chaim
over
and eat.
L'chaim.